Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Adrianne Jones. Adrianne Jessica Jones was a bright light in Mansfield in 1995. As a 16-year-old junior at Mansfield High School, she captivated everyone with her beauty, exceptional qualities, and impressive achievements. Adrianne was an outstanding student, consistently excelling in advanced honors courses and demonstrating a strong work ethic. She spent at least 2 hours each night studying to ensure her success, which earned her high grades. Her kindness, intelligence, and infectious spirit made her a role model and a beloved figure among her classmates and teachers. In addition to her academic prowess, Adrianne was a talented athlete. She was a dedicated member of the girls' soccer team, showcasing remarkable skill and dedication on the field. After graduating from Mansfield High School, Adrianne's dream was to become a veterinarian and help animals. After a game injury forced her to temporarily leave her team, Adrianne didn't give up on sports. Instead, she joined the girls' cross-country team, which allowed her to stay active and improve her fitness. She threw herself into the new challenge, working hard to get in shape. Her dedication paid off, and she soon became a key member of the cross-country team. In addition to her academic and athletic pursuits, Adrianne also held down a part-time job, working 20 hours a week at a local fast food restaurant, Golden Fried Chicken. Despite her busy schedule, Adrianne enjoyed being the center of attention, particularly from teenage boys in Mansfield. Her friends would even describe her as a bit of a flirt. She took great care in her appearance, spending at least 2 hours each day on her makeup to ensure she looked perfect. Adrianne, like many teenagers, often tested the limits set by her parents. Despite her good nature, her parents were particularly protective of her due to the changing environment in Mansfield, where crime was on the rise. They implemented a strict 9 p.m. curfew on weekends to ensure her safety, requiring her to provide proof of her activities, such as ticket stubs, if she wanted to stay out later. To prevent her from sneaking out, her father also nailed her bedroom window shut. Although Adrianne occasionally disobeyed her parents and left the house at night to meet her friends, on Sunday, December 3rd, 1995, she was given special permission to stay up late to talk to her boyfriend, Tracy Smith, who was out of town with his parents. During their phone conversation, Adrianne's mother overheard her mention that another call was coming in. When asked about the caller's identity, Adrianne said it was David from her cross-country team, who seemed upset about something. Adrianne's family started their day as usual the next morning, but her mother's concern grew when she heard Adrianne's alarm still going off in her bedroom. When she went to check on her, she discovered that Adrianne was missing, and her bed had not been slept in. Despite trying to stay calm, Adrianne's mother quickly became worried. She initially thought Adrianne might have gone for an early morning run, but this idea was quickly dismissed when she saw Adrianne's running shoes still on the floor. In the past, Adrianne had occasionally sneaked out at night to meet friends, but she had always returned home by morning, making her mother even more worried about her disappearance. Worried about Adrianne, her parents contacted the police. Unbeknownst to them, a shocking discovery was made on a farm several miles away. At around 7 a.m., on Seaton Road in Grand Prairie, Texas, a man was on his way to check his mailbox when he noticed that the gate to his property had been knocked down. Curious, he entered his farm and was met with an unsettling scene. Initially, the man thought he was looking at roadkill, but as he got closer, he realized it was a lifeless teenage girl lying on the ground. The man immediately called the police, who arrived to find a disturbing sight. The teenager had been shot execution style, with 2 bullet wounds on her left cheek and forehead. In addition to these gunshot wounds, her head had suffered severe injuries. Moreover, her arms and legs were covered in scrapes and bruises, indicating that she had run through the farm's barbed wire gate. A teenager's violent murder sparked a desperate investigation. The fact that she was found in her nightclothes suggested she had been preparing for bed when her life was brutally cut short. The execution-style killing led police to consider possible links to gang violence or drugs. After discovering the body on the farm, the Grand Prairie Police immediately alerted all nearby agencies, sending out a detailed description of the victim, including her age, height, weight, and other physical characteristics. They hoped that another agency might recognize the description and make a connection to a missing person. It wasn't long before the Mansfield police got in touch with Grand Prairie officers, having made a match. The Mansfield police identified the murdered teenager as Adrianne Jones. With the victim identified, the police had the heartbreaking task of informing Adrianne's parents about her tragic death. When they broke the news to her mother, she was overcome with grief. In the small town of Mansfield, news of Adrianne's murder spread quickly through her high school, leaving her classmates and friends devastated. Classes were interrupted as the news traveled through the halls, and students tearfully consoled one another. The town was on high alert following the discovery of Adrianne's body in a field, with rumors and theories circulating about her death. One theory was that Adrianne was involved in drugs, while others suspected a serial killer might be living among them. Adrianne's parents cooperated with the police, providing information about the last time they saw their daughter. Her mother specifically mentioned a phone call Adrianne had with her boyfriend, Tracy, and another teenager, David, who joined the call while Adrianne was on the phone. After midnight on the night of Adrianne's murder, one of her younger brothers heard a car engine outside their house. When he looked out the window, he saw a pickup truck driving away. The police were interested in identifying a person named David, who had called Adrianne that night. To learn more, they spoke with Adrianne's cross-country coach, who mentioned a team member named David Graham. However, the coach was surprised to hear that David had called Adrianne, as there was no indication that they had ever interacted before. David Graham was a 17-year-old high school student with big dreams. After watching his first air show, he decided he wanted to become an Air Force pilot. From then on, he dedicated himself to achieving his goal. David was well liked by his peers at Mansfield High School, where he was popular and charming. Many girls were attracted to him, but he was in a relationship with Diane Zamora, a high school senior who shared his desire to enter the military. Diane stood out from the crowd, actively pursuing her aspirations. After Adrianne's murder, the police interviewed David Graham, who acknowledged knowing her from their cross-country team, but claimed their relationship never went beyond friendship. When asked if he had contacted Adrianne on the night of her death, David denied it, saying he was home studying with his girlfriend, Diane Zamora. The police investigated David as a possible suspect, seeking information from Adrianne's friends to see if she had ever mentioned him. However, one of her closest friends, who was privy to Adrianne's secrets, said Adrianne had never discussed David with her. The police also checked Adrianne's phone book and found David's number was not listed, which further led them to believe he was not involved in her murder. As a result, they never administered a polygraph test to David and eventually cleared him as a suspect. The police investigated Adrianne's boyfriend, Tracy Smith, as a suspect in her murder. However, they cleared him after verifying his alibi, which placed him out of town with his family on the night of the murder. Tracy also passed a polygraph test, further supporting his innocence. During his police interview, Tracy suggested they investigate someone named Brian, whom Adrianne had mentioned was calling her on the night of her murder, while they were on the phone. The police identified the Brian in question as Brian McMillian, a local teenager. Their investigation into Brian McMillian revealed that he used to work at a pharmacy near the restaurant where Adrianne used to work. Brian had developed an obsession with Adrianne and would often visit the restaurant to catch a glimpse of her. Eventually, Adrianne grew tired of his constant presence and began hiding in the back whenever she saw him coming. The police questioned Brian McMillian about the murder of Adrianne Jones. At first, he claimed to have no knowledge of her, but later admitted to knowing her. When asked if he had talked to her on the night of her murder, Brian said he didn't remember. He explained that he had been drinking that night due to feelings of depression and loneliness. The officers also asked Brian if he had visited Adrianne's house on the night of her murder, and he acknowledged that he might have done so. The police asked Brian's father if his son could take a lie detector test, but his father refused. 1 week later, the police raided Brian's house with guns, a decision made due to concerns that he might be armed. The police took this precaution to ensure everyone's safety, including their own. After Brian was arrested for Adrianne's murder, many people came forward to show their support for him. Brian's friends said he was a gentle and non-violent person. His father also confirmed that Brian was at home all night when Adrianne was killed and didn't leave. Despite this, Brian was held in jail for 3 weeks, missing Christmas and New Year's, while the investigation and legal proceedings continued. During this time, the district attorney's office asked Brian to take a polygraph test, which he passed successfully. After this, the district attorney's office had little evidence to link Brian to Adrianne's murder, so they released him from custody. 9 months into the investigation, the police in Mansfield, Texas, finally got a breakthrough, and it came from Annapolis, Maryland, where Diane Zamora was attending the Naval Academy. Diane Zamora, a cadet at the Naval Academy, allegedly confessed to her fellow students that she and her boyfriend, David Graham, had murdered a girl named Adrianne Jones in Mansfield, Texas. The Mansfield police traveled to Annapolis, Maryland, to interview Diane, but she denied making any such admission. The Naval Academy suspended Diane and sent her home pending an investigation. Since Diane was uncooperative, the police went to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to question David. Initially, David claimed he didn't know why Diane would fabricate a story about killing Adrianne Jones. However, during the interview, David began to crack and asked to write a statement. In a 4.5-page confession letter, David detailed how he and Diane planned and carried out the murder of Adrianne Jones, including a cross-country event in November 1995, where he offered to drive Adrianne home. During the ride, David and Adrianne parked in an elementary school parking lot and had sex. Afterwards, David felt overwhelmed with guilt because he loved his girlfriend Diane deeply and knew that his infidelity would cause her immense pain. One evening, while David was helping Diane study for her SATs, they got into an argument. Unable to keep his secret any longer, David broke down in tears and confessed his infidelity to Diane. He told her that he had hooked up with Adrianne, which shattered Diane's heart and left her feeling deeply hurt and angry. Diane was inconsolable and lashed out at David, screaming and arguing with him. She was so angry that she wished he were dead, and she felt intense hatred towards Adrianne. Diane's emotions were too much to handle, and she struggled to come to terms with what had happened. David pleaded with Diane, promising to do whatever it took to save their relationship. David and Diane decided that the only way to repair their relationship was to kill Adrianne. In his confession letter, David admitted that on December 3rd, he called Adrianne Jones and asked her to secretly leave her house late at night to meet with him. He specifically asked Adrianne to keep their meeting private and not tell anyone else about it. David originally planned to lure Adrianne into a trap, kill her by breaking her neck, and then dispose of her body in a lake. On the agreed night at 2:30 a.m., David picked up Adrianne in his car while Diane hid in the hatchback. They drove to a secluded spot 10 miles out of town, turning off the highway onto Satan Road. David stopped the car, and Adrianne subtly adjusted her seat, creating the impression they were about to be intimate. Unbeknownst to Adrianne, David had secretly signaled for Diane to emerge from the trunk. Diane came out of the rear of the vehicle and approached the front. Diane confronted Adrianne, who was seated in the passenger seat. Diane then hit Adrianne on the head with a weight from David's gym set. Despite being severely injured, Adrianne managed to escape by crawling out of the car window. David and Diane panicked, and David grabbed his 9mm Makarov weapon to chase after Adrianne. Adrianne was severely injured and collapsed in a nearby field due to her head wound. When David caught up to her, he shot her twice and then returned to his car. After Adrianne died, David and his accomplice Diane exchanged "I love you" as their first words to each other. The police later questioned Diane, who had a statement prepared to confess her involvement. David and Diane were arrested and charged with capital murder. Although they initially confessed, they later retracted their statements, with David claiming Diane acted alone and Diane alleging David committed the crime by himself. In 1998, Adrianne's mother requested that the death penalty be removed as a possible sentence for David and Diane. Diane's trial began in February 1998. Multiple witnesses testified that Diane showed no remorse for killing Adrianne. The jury found Diane guilty of capital murder, resulting in an automatic life imprisonment sentence, with the possibility of parole in 40 years. David Graham was convicted of murdering Adrianne Jones and received a life sentence, with the possibility of parole in 40 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katrina Ashley Edlund Smith. Katrina Ashley Edlund was born on July 16, 1982, to her mother Vicky. She had two siblings, an older brother named Chad and a younger sister named Miranda, who looked up to Katrina as a role model. As children, Miranda would often try on Katrina's clothes and use her makeup, admiring her older sister and wanting to be just like her. As the years passed, Katrina and Miranda formed a strong bond, becoming more like best friends than sisters. Katrina grew up in Musney Park, Illinois, a suburban community outside the city, after her parents separated, and she lived with her mother. Those who knew Katrina described her as a kind, fun-loving person who cherished the holiday season and enjoyed giving humorous gifts to her friends and family. She was deeply involved in her church and had a strong desire to help others, always willing to lend a hand to those in need. Despite her happiness, Katrina longed to find love and thought she had found it when she met Todd Smith at a bar when she was 20 years old. Todd, a self-employed financial planner, had 3 daughters and worked from home. He met Katrina, and despite their differences, they clicked. Todd's flexible schedule allowed them to travel frequently. After 3 years together, Todd proposed to Katrina, and she happily accepted. They planned a small wedding in a local park, and Katrina was thrilled about their future. She loved Todd's daughters and was eager to build a life with him. Katrina's family, including her mother Vicky and siblings Chad and Miranda, adored Todd and thought he was an excellent match for Katrina. They trusted him to take care of her and believed the couple was meant to be. After marrying, Katrina and Todd settled in Musney Park and started their new life together. On October 20th, 2012, Katrina, 30, called her mother and said she was house-sitting for a friend. During their conversation, she mentioned she would visit for dinner on October 24th and had news to share. Vicky suspected that something was amiss, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Before ending their phone call, Vicky promised Katrina that she would cook her favorite meal, chicken and dumplings. Tragically, Vicky would never get the chance to keep that promise. Days later, Katrina vanished, and Vicky would never lay eyes on her again. On October 23rd, at 5 p.m., Todd, Katrina's husband, called 911 to report her disappearance. He told the dispatcher that Katrina was house-sitting for a friend and that he had been trying to reach her for hours without success. When he drove to the house, he found it empty. Katrina's siblings, Miranda and Chad, were alarmed when they heard the news. Chad, who was undergoing military training in Oklahoma, immediately flew to Illinois to help search for his sister. On the evening of the 23rd, a concerned citizen notified the police about an abandoned vehicle near Rock River. The caller reported that the car was not parked on the road, but rather in an easement, suggesting it had been hastily abandoned. When authorities arrived to investigate, they ran the license plate and identified it as belonging to Katrina Smith. Upon inspecting the vehicle, the officer found no signs of a struggle or any trace of Katrina herself. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was adamant that her daughter's disappearance was a clear indication of foul play when she learned that Katrina's car had been abandoned in an unfamiliar area. It was the only logical explanation to Vicky. If Katrina's car was found in that location, someone must have taken her and left the car there. Following the discovery of her car, Katrina's case was officially categorized as a missing person, and the search efforts intensified significantly. On October 12th, at 11 p.m., the police took Todd Smith in for a formal interview at the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. During the interview, Todd told the detective that he last saw his wife Katrina on October 10th, not October 22nd. He stated that Katrina had come home briefly to do laundry in preparation for a big job interview the following day. According to Todd, while the laundry was in progress, Katrina left to go to the mall to make a purchase and returned home at 8:30 p.m. Todd reported that Katrina briefly returned home before leaving again to make one last stop. She had told him she needed to complete an errand before returning to the house she was watching for a friend. The next day, after Katrina was declared missing, Todd made an emotional appeal to the media, pleading for her safe return. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears as he begged for anyone with information about her whereabouts to come forward. As the search for Katrina continued, search teams composed of officers and volunteers worked tirelessly to find her. They focused their efforts on a nearby park, where Katrina's car had been abandoned, hoping to find evidence or clues about her disappearance. When Katrina's brother Chad arrived in Illinois from his army training in Oklahoma, he joined the search for his missing sister at the park. With his military background, Chad took charge of the search party. He created a map, divided the volunteers into teams, and coordinated their efforts to ensure a thorough search. As the search continued, the officers employed a methodical approach, using dogs and walking in straight lines to cover as much ground as possible and detect any potential evidence, no matter how small. Meanwhile, Katrina's mother Vicky focused on spreading awareness about her daughter's disappearance. She posted missing person flyers at gas stations, convenience stores, and lampposts throughout the town, hoping to reach as many people as possible. Despite her overwhelming grief and fear of finding her daughter's body, Vicky was determined to keep searching for Katrina, even if she couldn't participate in the physical search herself. Todd, Katrina's husband, was overcome with emotion during this difficult time. Chad, trying to be supportive, urged Todd to stay strong and focused on finding Katrina. He stood by Todd's side, sympathetic to his brother-in-law's grief. Meanwhile, the police investigation turned up some disturbing clues. An officer found Katrina's purse near her abandoned car, and as he searched further down the road, he discovered more of her belongings, including her cell phone and bloody towels. It was clear that someone had deliberately discarded Katrina's possessions as they drove away from her car. Unfortunately, the police still had no idea where Katrina was, but they feared the worst. The recovered items were sent to the crime lab for analysis, and the police awaited the results with bated breath. As the police searched for clues, they explored every aspect of Katrina's personal life to understand what might have led to her disappearance. They wanted to know if she had any relationships outside her marriage, was involved in gambling or drugs, and what her daily routines were like. To gather this information, they interviewed her friends and family. Everyone they spoke to described Katrina as a kind, responsible person who always put her duties first and avoided anything risky. Her loved ones said she was dedicated to her job and had a strong work ethic. They also reported that she never showed any signs of addiction or irresponsible behavior. The people who knew Katrina described her as a loyal partner and a hard worker who always did the right thing. During the investigation into her disappearance, a woman came forward with an interesting clue. She claimed to have seen a blue car, similar to Katrina's, parked on a bridge over Rock River on the night she vanished. The trunk was open, and someone was kneeling behind it. Although the witness couldn't describe the person's gender or race, her tip led the police to suspect that Katrina might have been a victim of foul play and ended up in the river. However, they still needed concrete evidence to support this theory. The police continued to investigate Katrina's disappearance, looking into potential motives and suspects. Despite seeming to have a happy marriage, her husband Todd was still a person of interest. As the authorities knew that hidden conflicts or secrets can exist in any relationship, their inquiry led them to a teenager in town who had previously shown an unhealthy obsession with Katrina. Earlier in the year, Katrina had confided in friends about the boy's behavior, including allegations of voyeurism, such as spying on her through her bedroom window. This had made Katrina increasingly anxious at the time. Although the boy's activities had stopped when he left for college, the police wondered if he might have returned and resumed stalking Katrina. They devoted significant resources to finding him. 3 days into the search, crucial clues were discovered on Katrina's cell phone, which was being examined at the crime lab. The phone proved to be a crucial source of evidence for the investigators. By examining Katrina's cell phone records, they uncovered a wealth of information, including her text messages, call logs, pictures, videos, and GPS location data. This information enabled the police to reconstruct a more accurate timeline of Katrina's activities. The investigation revealed that Katrina was having an affair with a co-worker, Guy Gabriel. Initially, they had met after work and developed a connection that eventually turned romantic. However, a background check on Guy Gabriel exposed a troubling history of domestic violence. Additionally, the detectives found text messages in which Guy Gabriel demanded that Katrina leave her husband Todd for him. Given Guy Gabriel's violent past and his messages to Katrina, he became the top suspect in her disappearance. The police suspected that Guy Gabriel might have reacted violently towards Katrina because she refused to leave her husband for him. When Katrina's family discovered her affair with Guy, they were shocked and disbelieving. The seemingly perfect couple, Katrina and Todd, had hidden a dark secret. The news of Katrina's infidelity devastated Todd, who was unaware of the affair until the police investigation. Guy Gabriel was questioned by the police at the station, and although he appeared nervous, he admitted to the affair, but denied any involvement in Katrina's disappearance. He claimed to have been at work on the night she went missing. During the investigation, the police uncovered an incident that had occurred 2 weeks before Katrina's disappearance. Witnesses reported that a black Volkswagen Jetta had sped through the parking lot of the auto shop where Katrina and Guy worked, causing a scene during lunchtime. A mysterious driver in a VW Jetta threw a stack of flyers out of the car's sunroof, scattering them among the employees gathered outside. The flyers contained a derogatory remark about Katrina and Guy Gabriel's relationship, but the identity of the driver remained unknown. Meanwhile, the police questioned Katrina's hairstylist, who shared that Katrina had confided in her about feeling unsafe and threatened. Katrina had even considered buying a gun for protection and had become paranoid about being followed. She had gone so far as to take her phone to a store to check for a tracking device, suspecting that someone was monitoring her movements. At the police garage, crime scene investigators searched Katrina's car for clues and used a special chemical called luminol to detect blood. They found a large amount of blood in the trunk. Meanwhile, a firefighter pulled a mysterious object from the water, which turned out to be a severely decomposed female body. The body was difficult to identify due to its condition. At the medical examiner's office, dental experts compared the body's teeth to Katrina Smith's dental records and confirmed that the body belonged to her. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Katrina's family was devastated by the news, and her mother, Vicky, was in disbelief. The police cleared the teenage boy who had been allegedly stalking Katrina as a suspect after verifying his alibi. The police then turned their attention to Guy Gabriel, Katrina's boyfriend outside of her marriage. Guy provided an alibi, claiming he was at work during the time of Katrina's disappearance and murder. His managers and co-workers corroborated his alibi, and the police cleared him as a suspect. Although Guy was no longer a suspect, the police asked for his perspective on who may have hurt Katrina. Guy revealed that Katrina's husband, Todd, exhibited controlling behavior and encouraged Katrina to leave her marriage. The police investigated Katrina's marriage and discovered several concerning details, including Katrina's desire to divorce Todd, her meeting with a divorce attorney, and her separation from Todd. The police suspected Todd of being behind the mysterious flyer incident at Katrina's workplace. Their suspicion grew stronger when they discovered that Todd had test-driven a black Jetta, similar to the car involved in the flyer incident, around the same time it occurred. When the police informed Katrina's family that Todd was the prime suspect in her murder and was already in custody, they were shocked and devastated. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was particularly affected, feeling physically ill at the thought that Todd could be responsible for her daughter's murder. The police also discovered that Todd's financial investment company was facing legal troubles, providing a potential motive for the crime. Katrina was the sole breadwinner for her family since Todd was unemployed. The police suspected that Todd might have motive to kill his wife, as he would gain access to their funds if she left him and their daughters. To gather evidence, the police obtained a search warrant for the couple's home. During the search, they found a baseball bat in the garage with brays of blood on it, which led them to believe it might be the murder weapon. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma, suggesting a bat was used. A DNA test confirmed that the blood on the bat was Katrina's, linking the bat to the crime. The police also found a clean area under the car, which seemed suspicious. Further examination revealed that the bloodstains matched Katrina's DNA profile. 30 days after Katrina's murder, Todd was arrested and charged with her killing, bringing relief to her family. At his trial, the prosecution presented evidence that Katrina had recently visited a divorce attorney, indicating marital problems. On the night of the murder, Katrina had gone to Todd's house to do laundry for a job interview the next morning. The prosecution alleged that Katrina told Todd their marriage was over, triggering his violent reaction. They claimed that Todd grabbed a baseball bat, killed Katrina in the garage, and then disposed of her body by throwing it off a bridge at Rock River. The jury found Todd guilty and sentenced him to 55 years in prison. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Corey Richins. Eric Richins was born on May 13, 1982, and left a lasting impact on those around him. As a child, Eric was passionate about sports, actively participating in basketball, baseball, and soccer, which showcased his athletic talent and enthusiasm for staying active. Eric's true passion, however, was anything that involved being outdoors. He was an exceptional hunter, known for his impressive marksmanship, and had amassed an impressive collection of trophy animals from around the world. With his vibrant personality, Eric had the ability to light up any room he entered, spreading joy and laughter through his storytelling, playful pranks, and contagious laughter. As an adventure seeker, Eric lived life to the fullest in Utah, where he owned a wide range of motorized vehicles, including trucks, four-wheelers, and snowmobiles. He loved exploring the outdoors and relishing the thrill of adventure. Despite his love for fun and adventure, Eric was deeply committed to his faith, being a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Eric's family supported him on a 2-year mission trip to Mexico City, where he became fluent in Spanish. After high school, he attended the University of Utah, earning a degree in international studies with a minor in Spanish in 2009. While working in construction, Eric frequently visited Home Depot, where he met Corey Darden. Over time, They developed a friendly connection, and Eric found himself attracted to her charming personality and beauty. However, he was too shy to approach her directly. So Eric asked a friend to help him get her phone number. One day, while Eric was shopping at Home Depot, his friend discreetly asked Curry for her number, telling her that Eric was interested in getting to know her better. Eric anxiously waited to see if his plan would work. Eric took the next step and called Corey to set up their first in-person meeting, unaware that it would be a life-changing event. As soon as they met, they clicked, and their first date marked the start of a romantic journey. As they introduced each other to their families, their bond grew stronger. Corey's family welcomed Eric with open arms, and Eric's family was equally impressed by Corey's character and how well she fit with him. Although Eric's sisters, Katie and Amy, were initially cautious, they soon warmed up to Corey and accepted her into their family. In 2013, Eric and Curry got married in an intimate ceremony, making their relationship official. After their wedding, Curry gave birth to their first child, Carter, followed by Ashton and then Weston, completing their ideal family. Eric naturally took to being a father, and his boys looked up to him. Eric took great pride in his sons' accomplishments, whether they excelled academically, athletically, or artistically. He consistently showed his support by attending their events and celebrating their successes. Later, Eric established a successful stonemasonry business, which flourished due to his exceptional craftsmanship and attention to detail. Clients sought him out for his expertise in creating beautiful stonework. The business provided Eric and his family with financial security. Additionally, Corey, who worked in real estate, contributed to the family's income. Her entrepreneurial spirit, coupled with her knowledge of the local market, made her a valuable asset. She would buy homes, renovate them, and sell them for a profit. The Richins family enjoyed a wealthy lifestyle, symbolizing the epitome of success. However, their seemingly perfect life came to a sudden end on March 4, 2020, when Corey called 911 to report that her husband Eric was unresponsive. When paramedics arrived, they determined that Eric had already passed away. Devastated, Corey called her mother Lisa, who rushed to be by her side. Corey's brothers, DJ and Ronnie, were present too, overcome with tears and shock. The three of them struggled to come to terms with Eric's passing. Corey recounted that the evening had begun on a happy note as they celebrated her latest real estate business milestone, the purchase of a luxurious mansion. Before retiring to bed, Corey had even prepared Eric's favorite drink, a Moscow Mule, mixing ginger beer with vodka. Corey went to bed around 9 p.m., but ended up sleeping in her 9-year-old son's room because he was having nightmares. Later, around 3 a.m., she returned to the bedroom she shared with Eric. When she touched him, she was alarmed to find him ice-cold and unresponsive. Despite trying to wake him, she couldn't rouse him and knew something was seriously wrong. As she waited for the paramedics to arrive, Corey remembered the dispatcher's instructions to perform CPR on Eric, which she claimed to have followed. The paramedics were baffled by Eric's cause of death, speculating that it might have been an aneurysm, given his apparent good health and lack of known medical conditions. However, further investigation revealed that Eric had complained to Corey about chest pains the night before his death, which initially reinforced the aneurysm theory. But the autopsy results were shocking. Eric's cause of death was ultimately determined to be a lethal dose of fentanyl. Fentanyl is a highly potent pain medication that can be extremely dangerous and even deadly when taken in excessive amounts. After Eric's death, a critical question remained: how did this substance end up in his system? From the start, Corey and her family quickly blamed Eric's recreational drug use as the reason fentanyl was present. Corey explained that Eric would take a THC-infused gummy every night to relax, as he preferred THC, the psychoactive ingredient in cannabis, to unwind. However, Corey, her mother, and brothers had concerns about the origin of these gummies, suspecting that Eric didn't always buy them from trustworthy sources, and instead purchased them illegally. Eric's family strongly disagreed with these claims, believing there was more to the story, and urged investigators to explore other possibilities. Despite trying to move on, Curry faced significant challenges, according to her brother Ronnie, as the absence of their husband and father left a huge gap in their lives, leading their 3 sons to act out due to the uncertainty surrounding his death. Corey, grieving and seeking comfort for her children, turned to a creative outlet to cope with her emotions. She wrote and self-published a children's book on Amazon titled Are You With Me?, which aimed to help kids understand and deal with the loss of a loved one. The book tells the story of a young boy struggling to come to terms with his father's death through illustrations and narrative. In the book, Corey portrayed Eric, her late husband, as a protective angel always watching over their son. Her mother, Lisa, praised the book, saying it brought some comfort to Corey and her grandchildren as they navigated their emotions and rebuilt their lives. However, detectives investigating Eric's death soon uncovered evidence suggesting foul play. Just weeks after Curry appeared on local Utah news stations promoting her book and sharing her grief, she was arrested and charged with her husband's murder on May 8, 2023. The community was stunned by the arrest, and the tragic turn of events transformed what was initially a heartwarming story of a grieving wife and mother into an unbelievable tale of betrayal and tragedy. Curry is accused of murdering Eric by poisoning him. Eric's family believes Curry deliberately put a lethal dose of fentanyl in the Moscow Mule she made for him on the night he died. However, Curry's lawyer claims that no fentanyl was found in the glasses at their home. Curry denies any involvement in Eric's death, saying she had no reason to harm him. Her mother, Lisa, was shocked to hear about her daughter's alleged involvement and told investigators that the couple was happy and had no reason to kill each other. But as detectives dug deeper, they found that Curry and Eric's relationship was not as perfect as they seemed. The couple had disagreements, and Curry, who had given up her career to be a stay-at-home mom, wanted to be independent. She was also growing increasingly frustrated with Eric's frequent hunting trips. According to Lisa, Eric was unfaithful in his marriage, and he confided in her about the affair along with Curry. To address their marital issues, Eric and Curry sought counseling. However, Eric's family denies that he ever cheated on her. Eric genuinely loved his sons and wanted to save the marriage. Despite his efforts, Eric was preparing for a potential divorce. He set up a secret trust with his sister Katie without revealing his intentions. The investigation uncovered that Eric had 6 life insurance policies worth $3 million. Furthermore, Curry forged Eric's signature on an additional $100,000 policy just 2 months before his death. It was also discovered that Curry allegedly stole money from Eric's personal accounts and misused business funds over several years. Contrary to her claims, Curry's house-flipping business was failing, according to Eric's family representative. Curry's company was deeply in debt, with millions of dollars owed. According to the spokesperson, Curry urgently needed cash, and a prenuptial agreement signed before the marriage stated that she would not inherit the business assets if they were to divorce. However, if Eric were to pass away before her during their marriage, the assets would transfer to Curry. The spokesperson's claims were disputed by Curry's attorney, who maintained that the business was not in financial trouble. The attorney explained that the debt was a normal part of the house-flipping business, as it relied on lines of credit that would be repaid once the properties were sold. Curry's attorney clarified that the large debt figure mentioned was simply a result of regular business transactions. Curry's mother, Lisa, recalled that Eric had been supportive of Curry's business ventures, particularly when they bought the mansion where they were celebrating on the night of his death. In Heber Valley, Utah, a 10-acre estate with a mansion sat vacant since its construction in 2017, despite being close to popular ski resorts and Deer Creek Reservoir. This prime location offered endless opportunities for outdoor recreation. Curry, with the help of investors, bought the mansion with plans to renovate and transform it into a recreational hub. Her goal was to sell the property at a significant profit. After consulting an accountant, Curry and Eric discovered that they could potentially make a $12 million profit from the sale of the property, a substantial return on the initial $3 million investment. However, there's a discrepancy in Eric's involvement. While he seemed to be on board with the purchase, his family claims he was against it and had a heated argument with Curry about buying the mansion. Eric's family spokesperson claims that Curry gave Eric a drink containing fentanyl on the night of his death, and they believe this was not Curry's first attempt to harm Eric. They allege that in 2019, during a trip to Greece, Eric became violently ill after Curry gave him a drink, but Curry's brother Ronnie denies this, saying Eric was mistakenly given an alcoholic drink by a bartender while taking antibiotics. Eric's family also claims that Curry tried to kill Eric again on Valentine's Day 2022, a month before his death, when she brought him a sandwich that caused him to break out in hives and struggle to breathe. After Eric's death, Curry's behavior was questioned, including an incident where she allegedly attacked her sister Amy when she tried to open a safe containing a large amount of cash. Curry claimed she was defending herself to retrieve important documents, but was charged with assault and pleaded no contest in June 2023. Curry appeared in court for a 4-hour bail hearing, during which her attorney tried to convince the judge to release her on bail. Prosecutors presented 3 witnesses and evidence to argue that Curry had poisoned her husband. One of the witnesses, a cell phone expert, testified about Google searches found on Curry's phone, including queries about retrieving deleted iPhone messages, FBI's ability to find deleted messages, and the lethal dose of fentanyl. However, Curry's attorney countered that these searches were conducted after her husband's death, as Curry sought answers to the accusations against her. The prosecution also questioned the lead detective about potential sources Curry might have used to obtain the drugs that killed Eric. According to the detective, a woman named Carmen Labba, who claimed to work as a cleaner for Curry's business and home, told investigators about a meeting that took place in early 2022. During a call, Curry asked Carmen to buy fentanyl pills for an investor with a back injury. Carmen, who had a history of drug-related crimes and was on probation, agreed to the request. She later told detectives that she purchased 15 to 30 fentanyl pills and met with Curry to exchange them for cash. This exchange happened on February 11, 2022, just 3 days before Valentine's Day. Around the same time, court documents suggest Curry tried to poison Eric with a sandwich. Carmen also told detectives that Curry contacted her again, looking for even stronger drugs. She said Curry paid her with a check this time. Specifically, Carmen claimed that Curry wrote her a check for $1,300 about a week after Eric's death. However, Curry's attorney questioned whether the check could have been payment for cleaning services instead, and the detective acknowledged that this was possible. Curry's lawyer tried to discredit Carmen by pointing out her criminal history, including 4 first-degree felonies, and suggesting that she might not be a trustworthy witness. The lawyer claimed that Carmen may have been coerced into saying she sold drugs to avoid a long prison sentence, as the detective allegedly told her she would face serious consequences if she didn't cooperate. The lawyer also asked if there was any physical evidence to prove Carmen had bought drugs. The detective admitted that they found no text messages showing Curry asking Carmen for drugs, and no witnesses came forward to confirm they had seen the exchange. At the bail hearing, Eric's sister spoke to the judge, expressing her family's distress over Eric's death, and their fear that if Curry was released on bail, he would cause them further pain. Eric's sister asked the judge to keep Curry in custody, and the judge accepted her request. Meanwhile, Curry's family was upset because Curry was not allowed to leave jail before her trial and would have to stay there. They believed that Curry's time in jail was affecting her mental and physical health. In 2023, something serious happened to Corey while she was taking medicine given to her by the jail officials. She had a seizure and was quickly taken to the hospital from the jail. While Corey was in jail, she claimed that the officials gave her the wrong medication, which caused her to experience adverse effects. Fortunately, she recovered after being treated at a hospital. During her hospital stay, jail officials found a handwritten, unsent letter in her cell. They filed it into court records, claiming it was a note from Corey to her mother. Prosecutors argued that this letter provided additional evidence of Corey's intentions and motivations. In November 2023, they requested a no-contact order to restrict Corey's access to her mother and brothers, mainly due to the letter. Prosecutors claimed that the letter was evidence of witness tampering. According to prosecutors, the letter instructed Corey's mother on how her brother Ronnie should testify in court. Specifically, Corey allegedly wanted Ronnie to claim that Eric had admitted to obtaining pain pills containing fentanyl from Mexico during his trip abroad. The letter also instructed Ronnie to obtain text messages from Eric discussing his drug use. Corey stressed the need to link Eric's Mexico activities to his alleged drug involvement. Despite this, she vehemently denied accusations that a letter was an attempt to tamper with witnesses, claiming it was a work of fiction she wrote as a fantasy story. The judge ruled in her favor, as the prosecution failed to prove witness tampering. Currently, Corey and Eric's family are fighting for custody of their 3 sons, who are living with one of Eric's relatives. Although Corey is in jail, she still gets to see her sons through twice-weekly video calls. While her family has not been allowed private visits with the children, they regularly attend their sports events and practices, which are open to the public. If convicted of poisoning her husband Eric with fentanyl, Corey faces a sentence of 25 years to life. Multiple civil lawsuits have been filed against Corey, all related to Eric's estate. A central issue in these cases is the custody of Eric's children. Eric's family thinks that Corey's family is motivated by a desire to control Eric's assets, as whoever gets custody of the children will also gain control of his money. Corey's trial is scheduled to start in 2025. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Heidi Firkus. Heidi Marie Eriksson was born on December 14, 1984, to John and Alinda Eriksson, and was the youngest of their 3 children and their only daughter. She was known for her playful and artistic nature, and lived her life to the fullest. After graduating from high school in 2003, she continued her education at the University of Northwestern in Roseville. During this time, she was a regular attendee at Calvary Church in the city, where she had been involved since her early years. It was at Calvary Church that she met Nick Firkus, with whom she shared the role of youth group leaders, serving their community with dedication and passion. Nicholas Firkus was born on February 25, 1983, to Julie and Steve Firkus. He was a driven and ambitious young man who dedicated himself to his work as the director of operations at a reputable carpet cleaning company. Known for his well-rounded personality and strong work ethic, he had found his true match in Heidi, whom he met at their shared place of worship, Calvary Church, in 2005. At the ages of 22 and 20, respectively, Nick and Heidi made the joyful decision to take their relationship to the next level. Surrounded by their loved ones and the familiar walls of the church that had witnessed the blossoming of their love, they exchanged vows, sealing their commitment to each other. To their friends and community, Nick and Heidi's marriage appeared perfect. They shared a love for travel, biking, and their church. They often hosted dinner parties for their loved ones. Heidi had recently started working at a financial firm where her father was employed. Their bond seemed to be growing stronger with time. However, behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding. On the morning of April 25, 2010, Heidi called 911 from her home in St. Paul, Minnesota, reporting a break-in. Only 38 seconds into the call, Heidi yelled no, and a gunshot was heard. 65 seconds later, Nick used Heidi's phone to contact the dispatcher, saying, "Please, someone just broke into my house and shot me and my wife." Nick was overcome with grief, repeatedly crying and begging for help, saying, "Oh my Heidi, my wife is dead, please get here." He also shouted no in despair. When the police arrived, they found Heidi unresponsive on the kitchen floor with a gunshot wound to her back. Nick was beside her, still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, despite having been shot in the upper left leg. He was extremely upset and told the police that one or two intruders had broken into their home. According to Nick, he had grabbed his shotgun and tried to escape with Heidi through the back door, heading towards their detached garage. However, the intruder managed to take the shotgun from him and shot both Nick and Heidi. Sadly, Heidi was pronounced dead at the scene, her life cut short by the tragic events. Nick, meanwhile, was rushed to the hospital for treatment and was later questioned by the police while still in the hospital. Police asked Nick why he and Heidi left the safety of their bedroom to face the potential danger. Nick explained that they were trying to escape through the back door. After receiving medical treatment for his wounds at the hospital, Nick was released just 3 hours later and was interviewed again at the police station about the incident. At the police station, Nick provided a detailed account of what happened. He recalled watching a movie with Heidi and having a glass of wine before going to bed around midnight. Nick said he woke up around 6:10 to 6:15 a.m. when he heard the screen door open and someone fiddling with the doorknob. The investigators questioned Nick about locking the deadbolt, and he admitted that he and Heidi usually made sure to lock it, but he believed he had forgotten to do so that particular night. After hearing the noises, Nick retrieved his shotgun from the upstairs closet, which he had brought up from the basement a month ago because he noticed it was starting to rust. Although the shotgun was initially empty, Nick loaded it when he heard the noises. He then woke up Heidi, instructed her to call 911, and told her to leave the house and go to the garage where their cars were parked. Nick also shared that he and Heidi had a safety plan in place in case of trouble, which was to go to the garage where their cars were parked. Nick, who is right-handed, was holding a pair of jeans in his right hand and a shotgun in his left hand as he walked behind Heidi toward the garage. They stopped at the front door, where Heidi retrieved her wallet from a table. Suddenly, the door burst open and a tall, dark-skinned man rushed in. The intruder wore a dark hooded sweatshirt with the hood pulled tightly around his face. Nick dropped the jeans, and the intruder grabbed the shotgun barrel. The two men then engaged in a physical struggle. During the altercation, the gun fired, and Nick said his finger accidentally slipped onto the trigger. He believed he hit Heidi in the back, causing her to collapse immediately. They continued fighting over the shotgun, which fired again, hitting Nick in the upper thigh and causing him to fall to the ground. The intruder then fled out the front door. Nick told investigators that Heidi was unresponsive, and he eventually lost consciousness. Nick told the police that his house was supposed to be foreclosed the next day, and he and his partner Heidi had planned to inform their parents and friends about their situation on the same day. According to Nick, they had fallen behind on their bills, and their house had been foreclosed on and sold to someone else. As a result, they were required to vacate the premises, but they hadn't shared this information with anyone. Their plan was to pack up their belongings on Sunday and Monday morning, leaving some items in the garage to collect later, and then find someone to stay with temporarily. However, their plans were disrupted, and their peaceful home was left with an air of tragedy. The lives of Nick and Heidi were forever changed by the devastating events of that morning. The investigation continued, with law enforcement securing the area and interviewing residents. None of the neighbors reported seeing anyone leaving the Furcus residence. However, one neighbor, Brendan O'Connell, who was looking after kittens in a nearby house, told the authorities that he heard an argument followed by gunfire. Nick begged for mercy, claiming a shooter had attacked him and a woman. After talking to police, Nick's lawyer hired an artist to update the sketch, details emerging: an African-American male, 40 to 60 years old. The police initially searched for an unknown African-American male intruder based on Nick's description, but found no evidence or witnesses to support his story. Despite a thorough investigation, no one was arrested or charged in connection with Heidi's death, leaving the case unsolved for many years. Years later, a surprising revelation came to light. Over 10 years had passed since Heidi's murder, and Nick had seemingly moved on with his life, marrying Rachel and starting a family. However, when financial troubles resurfaced, Rachel began to suspect that Nick was hiding something. Rachel's concerns about their financial situation and Nick's evasiveness sparked her curiosity, prompting her to investigate Nick's past. As she dug deeper, she uncovered secrets and inconsistencies that made her question everything she thought she knew about her husband and his possible involvement in Heidi's death. Rachel was unaware of the financial troubles her husband Nick was hiding, similar to those he had faced with his previous wife Heidi years earlier. Her concerns prompted her to contact the authorities, which renewed interest in Heidi's murder case. Investigators began looking into Nick's second marriage to Rachel, whom he married in 2012. However, by the time Rachel spoke with the authorities, she had already divorced Nick due to his growing financial problems. Before their 2019 divorce, Rachel had recorded a conversation where she confronted Nick about his deception. She told investigators that Nick was repeating the same patterns he had with Heidi, including failing to pay property taxes. In fact, she had seen a letter warning that they would be evicted by 2020 if the taxes weren't paid. Rachel's decision to contact the police with her suspicions set off a chain of events that would once again bring the Heidi Fergus murder case into the spotlight. Sergeant Nicole Sipes, assigned to the case, listened carefully to Rachel's concerns and began re-examining the evidence. Sergeant Nicole Sykes of the St. Paul Police Department was determined to solve Heidi's murder. To uncover the truth, she made a bold decision to ask the FBI to analyze the 911 call audio recordings. She hoped to find crucial clues that could explain what happened on the night of the murder. The FBI's analysis yielded a surprising result. It found no evidence of a third person being present during the incident. This discovery contradicted the husband's earlier statement to the police, leaving Sergeant Sipes and her team puzzled. If only Heidi and her husband were in the house, what led to her death? The absence of a third person increased suspicion around the husband's possible involvement in the crime. Sergeant Sipes was more determined than ever to uncover the truth and bring justice to Heidi and her grieving family. The FBI's findings opened up a new avenue of investigation, which Sergeant Sipes was committed to pursuing with increased intensity. The investigators obtained financial documents that disputed Nicholas Fergus's earlier statements, further implicating him in Heidi's murder. Fergus's account of the events surrounding Heidi's death kept changing. Initially, he claimed that an intruder took his gun and shot both him and Heidi. Later, he said that the intruder didn't take the gun, but his own finger accidentally pulled the trigger, hitting Heidi in the back. The crime scene investigation yielded no signs of a struggle, such as overturned furniture or marks on the walls, contradicting Fergus's account. Forensic analysis of the scene also disputed Fergus's version of the shooting, particularly the trajectory of the bullet that struck Heidi. Furthermore, Heidi's 911 call made no mention of an intruder, and there was no evidence of a break-in or intruder at the crime scene. This lack of evidence led investigators to suspect that Fergus had planned to cover up his involvement in Heidi's death. As a result, an arrest warrant was issued for Nick Fergus on May 19, 2021, over a decade after Heidi's death. A SWAT team arrested Fergus at his home in Mounds View. The surprise arrest of Nick stemmed from Rachel's suspicions and the tireless efforts of Police Sergeant Nicole Sipes. This sudden development astonished many who thought the case had stalled and would never reach a resolution. As the legal proceedings progressed, the case details would be re-examined, and the truth about that fateful night would gradually emerge. At the trial, Nick Fergus maintained that he was innocent and pleaded not guilty. Many of his family members, including his father, claimed to believe in his innocence, stating that Nick's love for Heidi would have prevented him from committing such a violent act. However, the jury disagreed with their assessment. On February 10, 2023, the jury delivered a shocking verdict after deliberating for 10 hours. They found Nick, the person Heidi trusted most, guilty of her brutal murder. This outcome left everyone who knew Heidi in a state of shock and disbelief. The prosecution built a strong case against Nick by showing that he was facing severe financial difficulties, which they argued led him to kill Heidi to avoid shame and conflict. They questioned the truth of Nick's claim that a home invader was responsible, suggesting that he fabricated the story to divert attention from himself. The prosecution presented convincing evidence, including the lack of signs of forced entry and inconsistencies in Nick's account. Notably, there was no DNA or physical evidence to support the presence of an intruder, which raised serious doubts about Nick's story. Prosecutor Rachel Craker argued that Nick's inability to accept the truth of his financial deception led him to commit a shocking crime, sacrificing Heidi's life to preserve his reputation. In contrast, Nick's defense attorney, Robert Richmond, countered that it didn't make sense for Nick's financial problems to suddenly drive him to murder. Nick claimed that killing his wife would somehow boost his reputation, but this statement is illogical. After intense debates during the trial, the jury finally reached a verdict that would determine whether Nick would be held accountable for Heidi's death. The jury carefully considered the evidence, emotional testimonies, and legal arguments before delivering a unanimous verdict. Nick Fergus was guilty of first-degree murder. On April 13, 2023, the judge handed down the most severe sentence possible: life in prison without parole. Although found guilty, Nick still insists he had nothing to do with Heidi's death. He maintains his innocence even after being sentenced. When he was sentenced, Nick said, "I understand the pain and loss felt by everyone here today. Justice has been served, but it came at a great cost. A broken family, a betrayed community, and a life cut short." The verdict brought a sense of closure to Heidi's family and friends, but it also left them with the painful realization that the man they thought they knew was capable of such a heinous act. So, you must be thinking, where is Nick now? Nick is currently serving his life sentence at the Minnesota Correctional Facility located in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Here's what drove Nick to commit the tragic act. The motive behind the killing remains unclear, but there are clues. In June 2009, Nick received foreclosure papers on their house, which was then sold at a sheriff's auction the same month. 10 months before Heidi's death, eviction proceedings began in February 2010, with a hearing scheduled for March 8, 2010. Nick attended the hearing alone. Initially, the lockout was set for April 9, 2010, but Nick called the attorneys, claiming his grandmother was in the hospital and about to die. He requested the lockout be rescheduled for April 26, 2010. However, investigators found no evidence to support this claim. When questioned, Nick said Heidi was aware of their financial troubles and that they had made plans together to move out of their foreclosed home and start fresh elsewhere. The truth behind a tragic event was finally revealed by prosecutors. A husband, Nick, had been hiding their severe financial struggles from his wife, Heidi. Tragically, before she could discover the truth, he took her life. Instead of being honest with his wife and working together to find a solution, Nick chose a devastating path. According to prosecutors, Nick's motive for killing his wife was his shame and fear of revealing their financial problems, which included $118,000 in credit card debt and 22 months of late mortgage payments. By killing Heidi, Nick avoided confronting the consequences of his own deception. In the end, justice was served, But Heidi's loved ones still suffered immense pain and loss. Unfortunately, no legal punishment could undo the harm or bring back the vibrant life that was cruelly taken. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jacqueline Vandergriff. Born on March 4, 1992, in Carrollton, Texas, Jacqueline "Jackie" Vandergriff was the younger of two daughters. She grew up in the Colony, Frisco, Texas, surrounded by her loving family. Before she could even walk, Jackie demonstrated a natural talent for gymnastics by learning to somersault. This early start sparked a passion that would drive her future success. Recognizing her potential, her parents enrolled her in gymnastics classes at just 3 years old. As she grew, she refined her skills and enthusiastically participated in various competitions. Those who knew Jackie described her as a kind and empathetic person with a heart of gold. She genuinely cared about others and was a loyal friend who inspired those around her to be their best selves. Her presence brought comfort and joy to everyone she met, whether through words of encouragement or simply being a listening ear. Jackie's kindness knew no bounds, extending far beyond her human relationships to encompass a deep love for all living beings. A lifelong vegetarian, she was a fierce supporter of pet adoption from no-kill shelters and had a special place in her heart for animals. In her free time, Jackie was an avid reader and found solace in the magical world of Harry Potter, her favorite book series. Music was another one of her passions, with an eclectic taste that ranged from Pink to James Taylor and Rob Thomas. She was especially fond of musicals, with Rent being her absolute favorite. She would attend every performance that came to town. After graduating from Wakeland High School in Frisco, Jackie decided to pursue her passion for beauty by enrolling in the Paul Mitchell School for Cosmetology. Jackie Vandergriff pursued her passion for beauty and wellness by becoming a licensed esthetician. She then took her education to the next level by enrolling at Texas Women's University, where she majored in nutrition and food science. Her goal was to help others understand the importance of good nutrition and make healthy lifestyle choices. With a bright future ahead, Jackie seemed destined for success. She was on track to make a positive impact in the world. Tragically, her life was cut short in the summer of 2016 when she had a fatal encounter with a dangerous individual. Upon arriving at the scene, the officer found a worn footpath in a wooded area and followed it to a burned-out patch of land. There, he discovered a plastic blue kiddie pool containing a body that had been set on fire, making it unrecognizable. Due to the severity of the burns, it was impossible to determine the body's identity, including its age, gender, race, or any other distinguishing features. The remains were taken to the medical examiner's office for further examination. Later, fingerprint identification revealed that the body belonged to 24-year-old Jackie Vandergriff. As detectives investigated Jackie's final hours, they discovered that she was last seen in Denton, near College, where she visited 2 bars, Fry Street Public House and Shots and Crafts. While waiting for security footage from these establishments, the medical examiner performed an autopsy on Jackie's body. The examination revealed that Jackie was killed, dismembered, decapitated, and set on fire, with further mutilation occurring after her death. The most disturbing aspect of Jackie's murder was the removal of her heart from her body. As news of her death spread throughout Denton, the detectives started receiving numerous tips from people who reported seeing a suspicious individual lurking around the crime scene where a fire had been set. After further investigation, the detectives were able to acquire CCTV footage from 2 bars that Jackie had visited in the hours leading up to her murder. At 7 p.m., a man entered the Fry Street Public House and had a drink at the bar. An hour later, Jackie walked in and struck up a conversation with the bartender and the man. Security footage showed their interactions, suggesting a potential connection between them. About 45 minutes after arriving at the bar, Jackie tweeted, "Glad I decided to get off Tinder and walk to a bar." Later, Jackie and the man left the bar together, and headed to Shots and Crafts, where they socialized with a group of women. At around 9:45 p.m., Jackie and the man departed Shots and Crafts together. Surveillance cameras tracked their movements, showing them arriving at a convenience store where his car was parked. Jackie got into his vehicle, and that's the last time she was seen before her murder. The detective interviewed the bartender at the Fry Street Public House, where Jackie had applied for a job, and had a friendly conversation with the bartender and a male customer. Although the bartender couldn't provide any information about what happened to Jackie and the man after they left the bar, the investigation led the detectives to Shots and Crafts, where security footage showed Jackie and the man together. One of the women at the bar recalled receiving a business card from the man, who was a personal trainer. She had exchanged contact information with him because she was interested in fitness. At first, this detail seemed unimportant, but it would later prove to be a crucial discovery in the case. After handing over the card, she willingly shared the information with the investigators. The card belonged to Charles Bryant. Meanwhile, the detectives had obtained security footage from Walmart, taken at 4 a.m., showing Charles buying a shovel. The detectives then launched a thorough investigation into Charles Bryant's identity, as he was the last person seen with Jackie before her murder. The results were deeply disturbing. Charles Bryant, a 29-year-old man, lived 20 miles away from Denton, but he was drawn to the city for a specific reason. He was desperate to rekindle his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, who lived in Grapevine and attended the University of North Texas. 3 months prior, Caitlin had met Charles at her home in Grapevine, where she worked as a server at a restaurant. On her high school graduation day, Charles stood out from the high school boys Caitlin knew. He was almost a decade older, in his late 20s, and had a muscular physique covered in tattoos. Working as a personal trainer and bartender, Charles had accumulated unique skills and traits that fascinated Caitlin. In the summer of 2016, Caitlin spent most days with Charles at Grapevine Lake. As they spent more time together, their attraction grew, and Caitlin was drawn to Charles's mysterious personality. However, not everyone was pleased with their relationship. Caitlin's mother noticed the significant age difference between them as they grew closer. Caitlin's mother asked to see a photo of Charles, wanting to understand her daughter's relationship better. Although initially open-minded, she felt uneasy when she saw his piercing eyes, sensing something evil. Growing increasingly worried about Caitlin's well-being, her mother voiced her concerns, advising her to reevaluate her relationship with Charles. Caitlin ignored her mother's warnings, brushing them off as typical parental worries. She was blind to the danger signs beneath the surface of her innocent-sounding romance. Unbeknownst to her, her harmless feelings were about to escalate into a terrifying experience. At first, Caitlin was thrilled with her new relationship with her older boyfriend, but as time went on, she began to have doubts and wondered if her mother had been right all along. Charles seemed overly self-absorbed and controlling, and Caitlin couldn't shake the feeling that he had an inflated sense of self-importance. Charles frequently made Caitlin feel inadequate by telling her she'd never find someone as good as him. As she prepared to leave for college in mid-August 2016, she realized she couldn't ignore the red flags in their relationship any longer and decided to break up with him. The next day, Charles appeared at Caitlin's home, begging her to take him back and promising to change. She initially gave in, but soon realized her mistake. Within a week, Caitlin had moved to Denton for college and ended the relationship once and for all. However, Charles refused to accept the breakup. On August 24th, police stopped him on the University of North Texas campus due to his suspicious driving. Although they initially suspected he was driving under the influence, his blood alcohol level was within the legal limit. Instead, they found he had several outstanding warrants, arrested him, and later released him after several hours. After their breakup, Charles showed up at Caitlin's dorm room at the University of North Texas which he had somehow found. Caitlin called 911, and by the time the police arrived, Charles was gone. When the officer asked Caitlin what happened, she explained that she had ended their relationship because she was tired of how Charles treated her and spoke to her. Despite this, Charles refused to accept the breakup. The police issued a temporary no trespass order, banning Charles from the UNT campus. However, Charles was determined to find a way to reach Caitlin, even if it meant ignoring the restrictions. On August 31st, Charles found Caitlin on her first day at a new job. When Caitlin saw him, she told him to leave. Caitlin then scheduled a meeting with her manager to discuss the situation and ask that Charles be barred from entering the business. However, the manager told Caitlin that he couldn't grant her request. Caitlin was forced to quit her job because of an incident at her workplace. Charles was determined to confront her and would stop at nothing to exact his revenge and cause her more harm. This led to a cycle of fear and intimidation, putting Caitlin's life in danger. Caitlin's mother was worried about her safety and wanted her to come home, but Caitlin felt safe living in her dorm room on the University of Nebraska campus. However, on September 6th, Charles suddenly appeared at her dorm room, banging on the door and urging Caitlin to come out, claiming he had something for her. Fearing the worst, Caitlin hid in her friend's closet, too scared to emerge. Caitlin's deep-seated fears intensified as she imagined the worst-case scenarios that Charles might have planned for her. Fearing for her life, she made a quick decision and called the emergency services while hiding in a closet, speaking in a barely audible whisper, terrified that Charles might overhear her. Despite the dispatcher's efforts, Caitlin's voice was hardly audible due to her overwhelming fear. Meanwhile, the police arrived at the scene, but Charles had already escaped. However, he left behind a haunting reminder of his presence, a bouquet of flowers and a handwritten 2-page letter addressed to Caitlin. The letter contained unsettling messages that further fueled Caitlin's fear. Shortly after the incident, the police caught up with Charles outside the campus, where he was dressed in athletic wear, pretending to be a student out for a jog. He was arrested for trespassing and released on bail a few hours later. Caitlin tried to cut all ties with Charles by blocking him on her phone, email, and social media. However, he persisted in finding ways to reach out to her, creating multiple accounts to stay in touch. As Charles's behavior became increasingly threatening, the police intervened to help Caitlin get a protective court order. The very next day, she officially filed a petition for the order, which legally protected her from further harassment. After his first arrest, Charles continued to contact Caitlin despite a protective order against him. This led to his second arrest for stalking. He was arrested again just 2 weeks later for violating the protective order once more. While out on bail, Charles went to a location where Caitlin often hung out, where detectives suspected he met Jackie Vandergriff. Although there was no physical evidence linking Charles to Jackie's murder, detectives were concerned for Caitlin's safety due to the circumstantial evidence. Charles sent Caitlin several messages, including photos and texts, which led to his fourth arrest for violating the protective order. While in jail, detectives questioned Charles about Jackie's murder, but he denied any involvement. A search of Charles's home turned up a large military-style knife, Jackie's school purse, and a kiddie pool that matched the one where her body was found. Detectives consulted an expert who specialized in dealing with prolific killers, who believed Charles was hiding something. The expert used a friendly and casual approach to try to gain Charles's trust and get him to talk about the crime. By suggesting possible scenarios and portraying Jackie as an instigator, the expert tried to get Charles to open up. During the 3-hour interrogation, Charles's story changed, and he eventually admitted to unintentionally killing Jackie during what he called kinky sex. Detectives believed the motive behind the murder was Charles's uncontrollable rage towards Caitlin, his ex-girlfriend. Charles claimed that Jackie asked him to choke her with a large zip tie he had in his car, but he insisted that her death was an accident, and neither of them had intentionally tightened the zip tie. After the interview, Charles Bryant was arrested and charged with Jackie Vandergrift's murder. Following his arrest, Charles's ex-girlfriend Caitlin went on social media and checked Jackie's Facebook page, only to discover that they were already friends. This discovery made Caitlin remember receiving a friend request from Jackie's Facebook page on the day Jackie's body was found, before Caitlin knew about the case. Caitlin became convinced that Charles, the prime suspect in Jackie's murder, must have used Jackie's phone to send her the friend request. Christy, who had met Charles on a dating app, was shocked to learn that he had been charged with murder. In her brief time with Charles, she noticed several red flags. He was quiet and reserved, but he became attached to her quickly. When she ended their relationship, Charles persisted, professing his love, despite never having kissed. Christy, who worked with abused children, recognized patterns in Charles's behavior that were similar to those she had seen in her young clients. She suspected that Charles might have been a victim of child abuse. One day, she gathered the courage to ask him directly. To her surprise, Charles admitted to having experienced childhood trauma. The police couldn't find any evidence to support Charles's claims of being abused. Despite this, Christy believed him because she thought he was a kind person and felt sorry for him. She kept in touch with him, but from a distance, and never thought he was capable of murder. Jackie's autopsy didn't provide many answers, such as how she died or where she was killed before her body was dismembered and set on fire. This lack of evidence made it difficult for the prosecution to build a strong murder case, as many key questions remained unanswered. Charles admitted to getting rid of Jackie's body after she died accidentally during rough sex. Although he confessed to disposing of her body, he denied killing her. The prosecution wanted Charles's ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, to testify about his history of stalking and violent behavior. They hoped to show a connection between his anger towards Caitlin and his eventual murder of Jackie, who bore a strong resemblance to Caitlin, as Charles himself acknowledged during questioning. Caitlin testified in court without a jury present, but when asked to identify Charles, she was hesitant and uncomfortable. She eventually pointed him out, commenting on his smirk. After testifying, Caitlin left the courtroom and broke down in tears, overcome with emotion. The judge later ruled that Caitlin would not be allowed to share details about her past relationship with Charles in front of the jury. A year and a half after Jackie's death, Charles went on trial for her murder in April 2018. However, Jackie's best friend couldn't bring herself to attend the trial, finding the thought of facing Charles in person. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chad Durman. Chad Durman, a 32-year-old man from Claremont County, Ohio, was married to 34-year-old Laura. They had a blended family with 3 young sons, Hunter 4, Clayton 3, and Chase 7, and a teenage stepdaughter, Alexis 16. Laura stayed at home to care for the children while Chad worked to support the family. On June 15, 2023, Chad arrived home from work earlier than usual and suggested taking a nap with his family. He invited Laura and their 3 sons to join him in their bedroom, where they spent some time laughing and chatting together. However, this joyful moment would soon turn into a horrific tragedy. After a few minutes, Chad got up and opened the gun safe next to their bed. He retrieved a MAR model HC-22 rifle, loaded it, and shot his 4-year-old son Hunter twice. The sound of the gunshot was heard by Alexis, who was watching TV in the family room. She rushed to the bedroom to see what had happened. As Alexis reached the doorway, she was met with a horrific scene, her brother being shot. Overcome with terror, she turned and fled as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Laura, who was with her kids, rushed to help her son Hunter, who had been injured. She yelled at the other children to run for their lives. Alexis saw the eldest boy fleeing in the wrong direction, towards a field, and shouted at him to keep running. Chad, however, was hot on his heels, and soon shot his own 7-year-old son, Clayton. As Clayton fell to the ground, bleeding severely, Chad stood over him, seemingly triumphant. Alexis witnessed this horror and was paralyzed with fear. She then turned and ran back into the house, grabbed her youngest brother, and fled to safety, desperate to save their lives. Chad pursued her, caught up, and pointed his gun at her, demanding that she hand over the 3-year-old, Chase. Alexis begged and pleaded with Chad to spare her life, but he tried to shoot her in the head, only to find he had run out of bullets. Alexis took advantage of the reprieve and escaped to the nearby fire station, where she frantically stopped a passerby to get help. At 4:15 p.m., a girl called 911 to report that her stepfather had killed everyone in her house. The police arrived at the scene 10 minutes later, at 4:25 p.m., and found Chad sitting on the porch with a rifle beside him. They quickly arrested him and placed him in handcuffs. Despite the chaos, Chad remained calm and didn't resist arrest. Meanwhile, his stepdaughter Laura was taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center to receive treatment for her injuries. Fortunately, Chad's stepdaughter Alexis had managed to escape from the house earlier that day, avoiding the fate of her 3 brothers, who were tragically killed by her stepfather. Chad was officially arrested at 4:27 p.m. on June 15, 2023. When the police took Chad into custody, he showed no signs of distress or remorse, instead behaving politely as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. He was later taken to jail for further questioning and investigation. During the interrogation, Chad confessed to police that he had been planning the murders since October 2022. Chad told investigators that he had gone without sleep for 3 to 4 days because the idea of harming his own sons was too much to bear. This admission provided a disturbing glimpse into his state of mind in the days leading up to the tragedy. Investigators also looked into whether Chad had a history of aggressive behavior. Chad's phone records were reviewed as part of the investigation, which revealed that he had a history of traffic violations in Claremont County, with one exception, a criminal damage incident that occurred when he was 18 years old. Additionally, a 2010 domestic violence case was discovered, in which Chad was accused of choking his father, Keith Derman. However, the case was eventually dropped due to Keith Derman's failure to appear in court as a witness for the prosecution. These records provided valuable insight into Chad's legal history and past dealings with law enforcement in the county. Meanwhile, one of Chad's neighbors, Richard Kanan, told a news channel that Chad was angry on a daily basis. The woman who called 911 also gave an interview to the news channel, describing how she was running with her little black lab and frantically screaming, "Call 911! Call 911!" during the incident. Chad's property tax records show that he was up to date with his payments until 2023, suggesting that he was not experiencing financial difficulties with his mortgage. When questioned by detectives, his 59-year-old father, Keith Derman, was left stunned and struggling to come to terms with the news. "I'm still trying to understand," he said. Keith Derman expressed his disbelief that his son could commit such a heinous crime. He also hinted that Chad was struggling with personal issues that had become too much to handle. The community was deeply shocked by the news of the killings, with neighbors expressing their surprise and stating that they never would have expected such actions from Chad. Initially, Chad confessed to the crimes during his interrogation, pleading guilty to all charges. However, during his first court hearing on June 23, 2023, he changed his plea to not guilty. At a subsequent hearing on the same day, Chad appeared visibly distraught, wearing a green bulletproof vest and breaking down in tears as prosecutors detailed the horrific events of June 15. The judge described the case as an act of unimaginable cruelty. The father, who stands before the court, intentionally murdered his 3 young sons, aged 3, 4, and 7, in his own home using a rifle. The chief prosecutor revealed that Chad meticulously planned the events, reflecting a disturbing premeditation. One of his sons attempted to escape by running away in a nearby field, that Chad chased and caught the boy, dragging him back to the yard where he was subsequently killed alongside his brothers. The trauma inflicted by this man on his family, the community, law enforcement, first responders, and society at large is unfathomable. While there has been a full admission of guilt, the case is still unfolding, and the full extent of the facts is still being discovered. However, the sheer horror of what is known so far is almost impossible to comprehend. Chad's murder of his own sons is one of the most horrific, craven, and cowardly acts imaginable. According to the detailed bill of particulars filed in Claremont County, the judge was presented with a disturbing account of the events. The prosecutor read aloud the sequence of incidents that led to the tragedy. Chad deliberately planned and executed the killings, lining up his sons and shooting them. When their mother attempted to intervene, Chad shot her in the hand. The prosecutor revealed that Chad fired a total of 9 shots, causing devastating harm. One boy was hit once, while the other 2 were each struck 4 times. The prosecutor, Mark T.L., emphasized the brutality of Chad's actions, stating that the brutal killings left the family and community in a state of shock. Prosecutor Mark Talvey revealed that Chad Dorman confessed to the murder, saying, "I did it. Take me to jail. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have shot them." During the interrogation, Chad also pleaded guilty. As a result, Talvey is seeking the death penalty. In a statement to the media after the court hearing, Talvey expressed his outrage, calling the crime the most sickening and horrifying he has seen. He imagined the terror the victims felt as their father, who was supposed to protect them, murdered them. Talvey vowed to do everything in his power to ensure Chad Dorman spends the rest of his life in prison. He began by offering his deepest sympathy to the family for their unspeakable tragedy. Chad Dorman is accused of committing a horrific act of violence against his own family, resulting in the tragic deaths of his 3 young sons, Hunter, Clayton, and Chase. He faces 21 charges, including 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault, which could lead to the death penalty if convicted. The grand jury has indicted Dorman on these charges, and he is currently being held in the Claremont County Jail with a bail set at $20 million, the highest in the county's history. Dorman's lawyer has entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming that he was suffering from a serious mental illness at the time of the killings. The lawyer argues that executing someone with a serious mental illness is cruel and unusual punishment, violating both the Ohio and U.S. constitutions. The prosecution has requested a mental evaluation, and a court date has been set for May 3, 2024, to discuss the lawyer's request. The defense has agreed to provide a report from a mental health expert by June 3, 2024, to support their claim. Meanwhile, a judge has ruled that Dorman's confession will be thrown out due to violations of his Miranda rights during police interrogation. The police failed to fully read him his rights and continued questioning him after he requested an attorney. Several witnesses, including police officers, have testified in court, describing their encounters with Dorman. One officer recalled that Dorman said, "Take me to jail," during the drive to the sheriff's office, while another officer remembered Dorman referencing the Bible during his interrogation, saying that he did not kill his wife. In this case, Chad expressed a desire for a lawyer during the interrogation, but the detective ignored him. When a suspect clearly requests a lawyer during a custodial interrogation, it's not the start of a test, but rather a signal for the officer to stop questioning them. However, Detective Ross failed to cease the questioning and even left Chad alone for a while before returning to continue the interrogation. During the court hearing, it was revealed that Detective Ross did not read Chad his full Miranda rights. When questioned about this, Ross admitted to not reading the rights verbatim, but claimed to have covered the most important parts. However, it was established that Ross had omitted crucial parts of the rights. Ultimately, the judge ruled that the investigators failed to follow proper procedures during Chad's arrest in June 2023, violating his Miranda rights. Chad's lawyers argued that during his 3-hour interrogation, Chad requested a lawyer at least twice, but the detectives disregarded his request and continued questioning him. Additionally, they claimed that Chad's earlier guilty plea was a result of intimidation by the investigators. The judge later ruled that the detectives failed to fully inform Chad of his rights before the interrogation. Thus, any statements made during that time would be inadmissible as evidence in future court proceedings. This ruling significantly impacted the trial, limiting the evidence that could be presented against Chad. The legal complexities and public interest in the case increased, with Chad facing a potential death penalty if convicted. His trial is scheduled to begin on July 8, 2024, but the recent ruling may change the course of the trial. A final court hearing is set for June 14th, just before the anniversary of the tragic events. The trial is expected to last from July 8th to August 2nd. However, the authorities are still unsure about the motive behind Chad's actions. The motive behind Chad's shooting of Clayton, Hunter, and Chase remains unknown, but some people believe it may have been an act of revenge against his 34-year-old wife, whom he suspected of infidelity. However, this motive has not been officially confirmed. Meanwhile, a memorial ride was held today to raise funds for the Dorman boys' family, with hundreds of people participating in the 15-mile ride through New Richmond. The event, which featured motorcycles, jeeps, and cars, attracted over 100 participants and was organized by Alan Easterday. The community came together to show their support for the family during this difficult time, while the boys' father awaits trial for their murder. The accused, Chad Dorman, is being held in custody at Claremont County Jail as the legal case against him continues. Many questions still linger, including what motivated him to commit such a heinous act against his own children. While the community is still searching for answers, they are holding on to hope that justice will be served and the truth will eventually come to light. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marcos Matsunaga. Marcos Matsunaga was a member of one of Brazil's wealthiest families and headed Yoki, their business that produced a wide range of food products. Yoki was founded by Marcos's grandfather, Yoshizo Cardano, who had immigrated to Brazil. The company name Yoki was derived from the first letters of Yoshizo's surname and first name. Yoki's origins date back to the mid-20th century when it started as a small flour milling operation. Despite being formed during a time of crisis and war, the business not only survived but thrived, eventually expanding into a global company with a diverse product line. Born into a wealthy family, Marcos never experienced hardship or denial. As the successor to the family business, he inherited the company built by his grandfather and father. With this foundation, Marcos had the potential to become the family's first billionaire, a goal he pursued throughout his life. However, his ambitious plans were ultimately unfulfilled. Everyone who knew Marcos personally described him as a skilled and successful businessman. He not only preserved but also significantly increased the family's wealth, generating substantial profits. However, Marcos had a difficult personality. He was demanding, arrogant, and controlling, particularly with those around him. Additionally, he struggled with his physical appearance, having been overweight since childhood, wearing glasses due to vision problems, and being short and somewhat awkward. These issues led to difficulties in his interactions with peers from an early age. Marcos had few friends, and women tended to avoid him because of his unusual demeanor. For a long time, he was unable to form lasting, meaningful relationships. Despite his wealth and business success, he couldn't sustain romantic connections beyond a couple of dates. His arrogance and ego often repelled women, leading him to seek the company of escorts and sex workers. There is very little information available about his first wife. It is known that he married out of desperation and pressure from his relatives, rather than love or passion. Despite this, the marriage lasted several years, but both spouses quickly regretted their decision. The young wife initially tried to tolerate his difficult personality, hoping they could become a happy couple over time. However, she was mistaken, and they grew further apart over the years. Marcos frequently cheated on her without attempting to hide or justify it. He typically found mistresses on websites offering intimacy for money. One such mistress was Alice, an escort with a portfolio on these platforms. Marcos noticed her, a bright and attractive blonde with a beautiful figure, and began regularly inviting her on dates, generously paying for them. Alice was 6 years younger than him and was born into a poor and dysfunctional family in a high-crime area of the city. She never knew her father, and her mother struggled with heavy drinking and was often involved with men who shared her addiction. As a result, Alice had a difficult and joyless childhood, facing repeated physical and emotional abuse from her mother's roommates at a very young age. As soon as she finished school, Alice left her troubled home life and neighborhood behind. She took nursing courses, which led to a job at a hospice. However, she soon realized that caring for terminally ill patients was not fulfilling her dreams or utilizing her full potential. As a sensitive and vulnerable young woman, Alice became deeply attached to her patients, and each death felt like a personal loss. A few years later, Alice decided to pursue higher education and change careers. She chose to study law, which she believed would offer her more opportunities and open doors in life. After preparing for admission, Alice scored well on the entrance exams. However, her modest nursing salary was not enough to cover the cost of her studies. Alice was alone with no one to turn to, having cut ties with her family after leaving home. To support herself, she decided to monetize her physical appearance and signed up on an escort services website. With the site's help, she created an attractive profile, and soon, wealthy men took notice of the young and beautiful blonde. Through her escort work, Alice earned a good income, enough to cover her education expenses and support herself. However, she intended to quit this line of work once she graduated and found a job in her field. During this time, Alice met Marcos, a regular client who showered her with gifts and openly dated her. Although Alice knew Marcos was married, she never imagined that one of the country's wealthiest men would leave his wife for her. Alice Matsunaga's story resembled a Cinderella tale. A poor girl from a disadvantaged background, working as an escort, captures the heart of a multimillionaire who falls deeply in love with her. Marcos lost his mind over Alice, but it's unclear if she deliberately tried to win him over. 6 months into their relationship, Marcos decided he wanted to be with Alice long-term, so he filed for divorce from his first wife without hesitation. He began introducing Alice as his fiancée to everyone. To avoid revealing how they really met in Alice's occupation, Marcos and Alice fabricated a story about meeting casually in a cafe. They stuck to this version, and even Marcos's closest relatives and friends didn't suspect the truth. However, Alice wasn't warmly received by Marcos's family, the Matsunagas. His parents suspected that Alice had used her charm to capture Marcos's heart, despite his unattractive appearance, and was now pretending to overlook his difficult personality. Nevertheless, when Marcos announced his plans to divorce his first wife and marry Alice, no one strongly objected. Marcos organized an extravagant traditional wedding, complete with a white dress, numerous guests, and a large, multi-tiered cake. Following the wedding, he relocated his wife to his spacious and luxurious mansion, where she took on the role of mistress. Matsunaga was renowned for his passion for collecting expensive wines and rare firearms. His home featured a vast wine cellar, where bottles were meticulously arranged by year and country of origin. Additionally, the house had a secret room dedicated to his extensive collection of firearms and edged weapons, which adorned the walls from floor to ceiling. Marcos took great pride in his collections and continually sought to expand them. However, his home was also overflowing with antiques, luxury items, and modern art pieces, which were somewhat tastelessly displayed on the walls and every available surface. After the wedding, they decided to start a family, but despite their efforts, Alice struggled to conceive for an extended period. Consequently, they opted for in vitro fertilization, but success was not immediate. When their daughter was finally born, it seemed that their happiness knew no bounds. Marcos and Alice were devoted to raising their baby girl, planning for her future, and later, exploring the world together as a family, immersing themselves in diverse cultures and traditions. Their daughter was raised with love, care, and every luxury, like a true little princess. However, Marcos and his wife, Alice, shared a unique common interest: big game hunting. In reality, hunting had always been Marcos's passion. He had previously tried to share this hobby with other women in his life, including his first wife, but they had all found it repulsive. Marcos had given up hope of finding someone who shared his enthusiasm. Many people now believe that Alice took up hunting to gain Marcos's favor and win his heart. Initially, they visited shooting ranges together, where Alice learned to handle various firearms. Later, they ventured into the woods to hunt wild animals. Alice showed no qualms about taking the lives of animals, treating it as a competition: either you succeed or you don't. Marcos admired this attitude and enjoyed watching his wife skillfully handle her weapons and track her prey. He also taught Alice how to hunt and prepare wild game such as boars and deer. They would skin and carve the animals together, using specialized tools like large knives, cleavers, and axes to separate the body parts. The family didn't have traditional pets like cats or dogs. Instead, they kept poisonous snakes in specially designed terrariums that mimicked their natural habitats. This was a dream come true for Marcos, who had always been fascinated by snakes but had been discouraged from keeping them by his first wife. Alice had won Marcos over by embracing his unconventional hobbies. By the spring of 2012, Marcos was on the verge of making the deal of a lifetime, one that would catapult him to billionaire status and take his income to new heights. He was busy negotiating with potential business partners, planning to sell the family company and invest the profits in a lucrative new venture. Marcos was rarely at home due to his complete absorption in work and the realization of his ambitious plans. He and his wife resided in an elite apartment complex in the city's business center, near the main office of his company. However, Marcos spent most of his time away, leaving his young wife alone and bored in their luxurious apartment with a panoramic city view. Marcos' work schedule was tightly packed with meetings, business discussions, and specialist consultations, often keeping him away from home overnight. Despite this, he promised his wife that once the deal was finalized, their lives would undergo a significant transformation. But on May 19, 2012, the eve of a billion-dollar deal, Marcos vanished without a trace. His wife, Alice, did not report Marcos missing until the next day. She believed he was at work, attending a scheduled meeting that could have lasted into the night and early morning. Marcos was supposed to meet a business partner and had warned Alice that he might spend the night at the office before heading straight to the meeting. However, when Marcos failed to return home and stopped answering his phone, Alice grew concerned and filed a missing persons report. Police quickly discovered that Marcos had missed both the evening and morning meetings, which was unusual for him. This led them to suspect that Marcos might have been kidnapped, and they expected a ransom demand to be made to his family within hours. Despite this, 24 hours passed, followed by another 24 hours, without any ransom demands. As time went on, hopes of finding Marcos alive began to dwindle. Meanwhile, investigators questioned Marcos's relatives, friends, and business partners to see if he had any enemies or if anyone might benefit from his disappearance or the disruption of his upcoming deal. However, they were unable to identify anyone who might have wanted Marcos dead. Marcos was a skilled businessman who made strategic decisions that generally benefited everyone. However, his personal life was marred by infidelity. His wife, Alice, discovered that he was cheating on her with a woman named Natasha. Despite his promise to end the affair after Alice threatened to divorce him, Marcos continued to see Natasha, albeit more discreetly. Alice suspected that the affair was ongoing and hired a private detective to gather evidence. The detective uncovered photographs and videos of Marcos and Natasha on romantic dates at restaurants and venues that Marcos and Alice regularly visited. It seemed that Marcos was openly flaunting his infidelity, taking his mistress to places where he was well known and where his wife might find out. As it was later revealed, Natasha Lima, a businessman, was discovered on the same escort services website where he had first met Alice. They had been together for approximately 5 months, during which time he gifted her an expensive car and paid a substantial sum of money for Natasha to delete her profile from the site. Alice presented photos and videos as evidence of her husband's infidelity to Marcos's parents. She mentioned that she had shown all this to Marcos the day before his disappearance, but instead of apologizing and asking for forgiveness, he packed his belongings, informed his wife that he was leaving her, and then departed from their apartment, vanishing without a trace. Based on Alice's account, it seemed that her husband had given in to his desires and decided to run away with his new mistress. However, those who knew Matsunaga unanimously agreed that he was too invested in the business, which his family had built over decades, to simply abandon it and disappear. The answers to many questions were uncovered about a week later when a passerby discovered scattered garbage bags containing human remains in a deserted area roughly 50 kilometers from Marcos's residence. The man immediately notified the police of his gruesome discovery. The victim was soon identified as Marcus Matsunaga, a missing person who had been searched for nationwide. According to experts, Matsunaga was shot in the head and then dismembered. His body was packed into garbage bags and dumped on the outskirts of the city. The killer's skills with a carving knife suggested they were either a surgeon or an experienced butcher. This conclusion was drawn from the precise cuts made to separate the body parts. The investigation initially lacked concrete leads, so it began by reviewing the last known location of the deceased. The elite residential complex where Matsunaga lived with his wife and daughter had multiple surveillance cameras, and their footage was carefully examined. The evening before Matsunaga went missing, he and his wife ordered food to be delivered to their home. Security footage shows Matsunaga taking the elevator to the first floor, then returning to his apartment with pizza boxes in hand. He entered the apartment and never left again, not that evening, overnight, or the next day. Despite this, his wife was seen leaving the apartment the following morning with 3 large, wheeled suitcases. The footage shows Alice struggling to move heavy suitcases, which sparked the investigators' suspicions about their contents. On the same day, she was taken into custody and questioned at the police station. Initially, she denied any wrongdoing, sticking to her story that her husband had left her for another woman. However, when shown the elevator footage, she broke down in tears and began to open up. Alice revealed that her marriage had been troubled for a long time, and her husband's behavior had become increasingly abusive. He constantly belittled her, bringing up her past work as an escort and claiming he had rescued her. He also controlled every aspect of her life, isolating her from friends and criticizing her parenting. When Alice mentioned divorce, Marcos threatened to leave her with nothing, take their daughter, and restrict her access to the child. On the evening of the incident, Alice confronted her husband with photos of him and his mistress, which only enraged him. He physically abused her, and Alice's memories of what happened next are hazy. She doesn't recall how she obtained the gun used to shoot her husband. Later, realizing what she had done, Alice attempted to cover up the crime by disposing of the body and making it seem like her husband had vanished. Alice, a former nurse familiar with human anatomy, had been taught by her husband how to dissect animal carcasses. They had the necessary tools at home, making the process of cutting up her husband's body a matter of technique. This gruesome task was carried out while their young daughter slept in the next room. However, Alice's testimony raised many doubts and questions from the start. Further investigation revealed that Alice received photos and videos of her husband's infidelity from a private detective on May 20th, after she had already killed him. She presented these to her husband's parents, claiming he had abandoned her for his mistress. A witness, Natasha Lima, testified in court that Marcos wanted a divorce but was afraid of Alice, describing her as mentally unstable and capable of terrible things. Natasha stated that the last time she saw Marcos, he complained about the constant family scandals and shared his plans to move to Florida after selling his company. He intended to start a new business and leave Alice behind, as he planned to divorce her and move on with his life. Experts made a disturbing discovery. There was blood in Marcos's lungs, indicating he was still alive and trying to breathe when his head was severed from his body. This contradicts Alice's claim that he died instantly from a bullet wound. Furthermore, the pathologist found that the bullet entered Marcos's head at an unusual angle, suggesting he was not expecting to be shot and made no attempt to defend himself. This finding contradicts Alice's account of Marcos attacking her and her need to defend herself. Most witnesses testified that Marcos, despite his difficult personality and hurtful words, never physically harmed anyone. It appears that Alice fabricated the episode, taking advantage of Marcos's inability to refute her claims. Ultimately, the court found Alice guilty of premeditated murder with extreme cruelty and attempting to cover up the crime. Alice Metsuniga received a 20-year prison sentence, a punishment many deemed too lenient for her crime. The victim's parents are now tasked with raising their granddaughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Rachel O'Reilly. Rachel O'Reilly was born in 1974 in the northern outskirts of County Dublin, Ireland. She was adopted by Rose and Jim Calley at a young age, as her biological parents were not known to her. The Calley, unable to have children of their own, devoted their love to their 5 adopted children, including Rachel. Growing up, Rachel was a diligent and ambitious individual. She excelled in school, participated in sports, assisted her parents with household chores, and avoided causing any trouble. As a result, she developed into a sociable, open, and exceptionally kind person who easily connected with others and steered clear of conflicts. During her teenage years, Rachel developed a passion for softball, regularly competing in tournaments and setting multiple local records. She also formed a strong bond with her adoptive mother, confiding in her and maintaining a close relationship even after she got married and started a family of her own. After graduating from high school, Rachel attended a local university to study marketing. At the same time, she worked in sales at a department store in the city, where she met Joe O'Reilly. Joe O'Reilly was born in 1972 in County Dublin to a humble family. He was the second child and had an older sister. His parents instilled in their children the value of hard work and independence. As a young man, Joe was tall, athletic, and enjoyed softball. After completing high school, he studied advertising through correspondence and worked as a manager in a department store. It was at this department store that he met Rachel, who started working there a few months after Joe. At the time of their meeting, Joe was 19 and Rachel was 17. Joe was immediately drawn to Rachel, taking the initiative to introduce himself to Rachel. Her petite stature and bright smile captivated him. Joe was interested in taking Rachel on a date, but she refused for reasons unknown. Despite this, Joe continued to try to win her over by giving her compliments and surprising her with small gifts like flowers and chocolates at work. However, Rachel remained unresponsive to his efforts. Joe read Rachel's favorite book to find a common conversation topic, but things only improved when Joe discovered Rachel's passion for softball. He joined her at the stadium, walked onto the field during practice, and participated in the game. With his experience and skills in softball, Joe led the team to victory, finally impressing Rachel and having a date. Their relationship progressed quickly. He surprised Rachel with a trip to Paris, where he proposed on the Eiffel Tower. Rachel couldn't resist and agreed to marry him, thinking she had found a fairy tale prince. Years later, they married and had 2 sons. They moved to the Scottish province of Null, purchasing a cozy home perfect for raising their children. After the birth of their eldest son, Rachel left her job to care for her husband and child. 2 years later, they had a second son. At work, Joe demonstrated his capabilities as a reliable, skilled, and diligent specialist. He was always punctual, arriving first and leaving last when necessary. Joe also prioritized fitness, often visiting the gym before work, and even had exercise equipment at home. As their children grew older and started attending kindergarten, Joe's wife Rachel sought to supplement their income. She became a distributor for a well-known cosmetics company and sold household items. This new role allowed her to interact more with their neighbors, who appreciated her kindness and openness. However, as time passed, Joe's presence at home became increasingly scarce. He would only return to sleep, shower, and change clothes, attributing his absence to his demanding job and anticipated promotion. Despite his wife's support, they began to drift apart, and their family relationship declined significantly. In the summer of 2004, a disturbing incident occurred. An anonymous individual sent a letter to Child Protective Services, falsely accusing Rachel of being a bad mother and mistreating her 4- and 2-year-old sons. As a result, a special commission visited the family's home to investigate the allegations. Despite finding no evidence of wrongdoing and receiving positive testimonials from relatives and neighbors about Rachel's parenting, the letter tarnished her reputation. On Monday, October 4, 2004, Rachel's day began normally. Her husband, Joe, left for work at dawn while she and their sons were still asleep. Throughout the day, Joe attempted to contact Rachel several times via text and phone calls, but she didn't respond. He then called their home phone, leaving a worried message on the answering machine, asking Rachel to call him back as soon as possible. In the afternoon, Joe received the concerning call from the kindergarten teacher, informing him that Rachel had failed to pick up the children, which was unprecedented. Joe called his mother-in-law to ask if she knew where Rachel was. When she said she didn't know, Joe asked her to go to their home to check on things. At the same time, Joe went to pick up the kids from kindergarten. When Rose arrived at her daughter's house, she saw Rachel's car in the yard, so she knew Rachel was home. However, the house was dark and quiet, and Rachel didn't answer when Rose called out to her. The first thing Rose noticed was the chaotic state of the house, with cabinets and drawers wide open and their contents scattered all over the floor, resembling a robbery scene. However, Rachel was nowhere to be found. As Rose's mother entered the bedroom, she was met with a horrifying sight. Rachel lay on the floor in a massive pool of her own blood, which was splattered everywhere, on the walls, furniture, and even the ceiling. Rachel's hair was bloody and matted, with her skull visible in some areas. Rose rushed to her daughter, hoping against hope that she might still be alive. But upon touching Rachel's arm, she realized it was cold and stiff, indicating that Rachel had been dead for several hours and that there was no possibility of saving her. Overwhelmed by grief, Rose started screaming and calling out for help before dashing to the phone to dial the police. Her cries for help attracted the attention of the neighbors, including a doctor, who hastened to the scene. He was the first to examine Rachel's body, confirming that she was beyond help. By the time Joe arrived, a crowd had gathered outside the house. Upon learning of his spouse's death, Joe was consumed by anguish, screaming in disbelief as he rushed inside. In the bedroom, beside his wife's lifeless body, Rachel became unhinged. He cried, screamed, and vowed to avenge his wife's brutal murder. The police officers who arrived at the scene described it as the most horrific attack on a defenseless woman they had ever encountered. The murder weapon was likely a heavy, blunt object used with extreme force to inflict severe injuries on Rachel. The attack was so vicious that Rachel's body showed no signs of attempting to defend herself, suggesting she was caught off guard from behind. While the crime scene resembled a robbery, investigators suspected a personal motive or intense hatred due to the brutality of the attack. However, it was unclear who could harbor such animosity towards a young, petite mother of two. The investigation began with interviews of Rachel's family members and neighbors, who all claimed she had no enemies and was well-liked by everyone. None of the neighbors reported seeing anything suspicious on the day of the murder, including strange cars or individuals near the victim's house. Joe, Rachel's husband, stated he had spent most of the day at a bus depot on the other side of town for work and had a coworker who could confirm his alibi. The coworker corroborated Joe's statement, but the police couldn't shake off their lingering doubts. The scene resembled a robbery, yet nothing of significant value was missing. A sum of €1,000 lay untouched on the bedside table in plain sight, and another stash in the kitchen cupboard was also left undisturbed. In the dressing table, a jewelry box was found, but only a pair of chains and earrings were missing, discovered separately in a drawer. Joe reported that a digital camera, silverware, and one of his dumbbells, likely used as the murder weapon, were also missing. The whole situation seemed bizarre. The house was ransacked, the landlady brutally murdered, all for seemingly trivial items. When questioned by the police, Joe appeared distraught, crying, shaking, and feverish. However, one investigator later noted that Joe's state seemed more like nervous excitement than genuine grief or shock. Joe's behavior became even more suspicious when asked about the possibility of his wife having an affair. He firmly denied it, but then awkwardly added that he had never cheated on his wife, a statement that sounded unconvincing. 2 miles away from the crime scene, a bag was discovered in some bushes. The bag contained a camera, silverware, and a few pieces of jewelry that matched the items reported stolen by Joe. With this new evidence, the initial theory of a robbery gone wrong could be ruled out, and the case was reclassified as a premeditated murder. The widower, who had been trying to show grief and pain, came under suspicion because his emotions seemed insincere, making him the primary suspect. Joe had no evidence to present, so the detectives had to thoroughly investigate his alibi, the crime scene, and his relationship with his wife. Joe claimed that on the morning of the incident, he stopped by the gym, which was a regular part of his routine. Surveillance cameras in the parking lot and the gym confirmed his presence. He then went to the office and later visited a bus station in a remote area of the city to check on the placement of advertisements on vehicles. A colleague corroborated Joe's story, stating that they had spoken on the phone around that time. The investigators then seized Joe's computer from his workplace for further inspection. The emails on Joe's computer contained some suspicious correspondence, which he had partially deleted. However, specialists were able to recover the deleted messages, and the police became convinced they were on the right track. The emails revealed that Joe frequently communicated with his friend and sister, constantly complaining about his wife, Rachel. He used insults and profanity to describe her, stating that she no longer attracted him as a woman and that she caused him outright disgust. Moreover, the computer revealed a suspicious correspondence between Joe and his colleague, Nikki Pelly. It was evident from their communication that their relationship went beyond a friendship, and both of them should be questioned. Nikki Pelly worked at an advertising company and frequently interacted with Joe for work-related purposes. Despite being 10 years older than Joe, she and Joe were having an affair. The exact timeline of their workplace romance was unclear, but it was discovered that Joe spent evenings and nights at Nikki's place. Meanwhile, his wife, Rachel, was under the impression that Joe was busy with work. Joe's messages to Nikki revealed that he promised they would soon be together, along with his sons from his marriage to Rachel. These messages raised suspicions, as the children would likely live with Rachel in the event of a divorce. Initially, Joe denied having any extramarital affairs. However, when confronted with irrefutable evidence of his infidelity, he admitted to secretly dating Nikki for a period before allegedly breaking up. The O'Reilly house was cordoned off as a crime scene for over a week, and no one was allowed to enter while the police thoroughly examined and documented the premises. During this time, Joe lived with his sister at their grandparents' home. At the funeral, Joe's behavior was unexpected. Instead of appearing distraught, he seemed remarkably calm and composed, almost as if he was avoiding the coffin. When it was his turn to bid farewell, he did so briefly and without emotion. As he walked away, he casually remarked that the coffin could be closed and buried. After the family returned home, they found everything in the same state as it was on the day of the crime, except for the absence of the body. Joe asked his in-laws to accompany him, and they agreed, thinking he needed their support. However, upon arriving at the scene, Joe began to speculate about the killer's actions in a way that seemed unusual. He walked around the room where his wife had been murdered, describing the attack in vivid detail. He pointed out dried blood spatters and suggested that the perpetrator might have gone to the bathroom to wash off the blood and clean the crime weapon before taking it with him. Joe's account was disturbingly detailed, and he even used gestures to mimic the blows, which was unsettling to witness. However, his parents thought his behavior was a way to cope with stress and talk about his feelings. Meanwhile, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that her son-in-law was repeating a pattern of behavior and was responsible for their daughter's murder. Shortly after the funeral, Joe started seeking media attention, giving numerous interviews. He invited reporters to his home, giving them a tour of the crime scene and describing what happened. On camera, Joe would address the killer, urging them to surrender to the police. 3 weeks after the tragedy, the family agreed to participate in a TV program about the crime. While Rachel's parents were overcome with grief, Joe acted like a celebrity on set. He chatted with the makeup artists, asked about his on-camera appearance. The police, who still suspected Joe, and followed him and discovered he went to see his mistress, Nikki, after the TV show. By then, they were convinced he was the killer and focused on gathering evidence for the court. Gathering evidence was a lengthy, complicated, and painstaking process, mainly because the key piece of evidence, the instrument of the crime, was never found. However, other crucial evidence was collected. The first to testify were Nikki, Joe's mistress, and the colleague who had previously confirmed Joe's alibi. Both faced potential jail time for perjury and decided to come clean to avoid risking their freedom. Nikki revealed that she and Joe had never actually broken up, despite their earlier claims. In fact, their ongoing relationship had been discovered by Rachel, leading to a major argument between the spouses on the eve of the tragedy. The colleague, on the other hand, admitted that he wasn't entirely sure if Joe was at the bus station on the other side of the city at the time of his wife's murder. He had simply corroborated Joe's story as a favor, without realizing at the time that Joe was a suspect in the crime. Investigators also recovered incriminating correspondence from Joe's computer, including messages where he insulted his wife and made plans for a future with Nikki and their children. Furthermore, after reviewing numerous interviews with Joe and footage from a TV program, police concluded that he had described the crime in disturbing detail, suggesting that only the perpetrator could have known such specifics. Joe's careless comments helped investigators piece together the events of the crime. He began the day by intentionally making an appearance at the gym, ensuring he was captured on camera. Later, he informed his colleagues that he would be working in a different part of the city, and his phone might be out of range. However, instead of heading to the bus station as he claimed, he returned home and armed himself with a dumbbell. He lay in wait in the marital bedroom for his wife, who had taken their children to kindergarten. When she arrived, he launched a surprise attack from behind, leaving her no chance of escape. After the murder, Joe, who later confessed, washed the blood off himself and the dumbbell in the adjacent bathroom. Joe changed his clothes and scattered his belongings to make it look like a robbery. He then went to work, getting rid of the evidence along the way. In an attempt to create an alibi, he called his wife's cell phone, sent her messages, and left voicemails, pretending she was still alive. At work, he acted strangely, appeared overly excited, and had shaky hands. His colleagues noticed this and asked if he was okay, but he seemed confused and rushed to his office. Shortly after, the daycare center called to inform him that his daughter hadn't been picked up. Instead of rushing home, he sent his mother-in-law to the house, where she would be the first to discover her daughter's disfigured body. Joe thought he had covered his tracks and that his guilt would be impossible to prove. However, his desire for fame and public attention ultimately led to his downfall. Despite most of the evidence being circumstantial, Joe was arrested 2 years after committing the crime. The key to proving his guilt lay in reconstructing his movements on the day of the crime, using data from a cell phone that he always carried with him. Notably, at the time of Rachel's murder, Joe's cell phone signal was coming from the family home, which was later verified through phone records. Additionally, it was revealed during the trial that an anonymous letter to Child Protective Services, accusing Rachel of being an abusive mother, was written by Joe's mother at his request. Joe had been trying to discredit his wife, as he knew he would not be granted sole custody of their children in the event of a divorce. However, when social services investigated the claims made in the anonymous letter, they found no evidence to support them. Undeterred, Joe decided to take matters into his own hands. During the trial, he showed no remorse, chatting animatedly with his defense attorneys and even attempting to joke, convinced that he would be acquitted. But in the summer of 2007, the court found Joe guilty and sentenced him to life imprisonment. The lawyers attempted to dispute the decision but were unsuccessful, with all their complaints and appeals being denied. Joe and Nikki's relationship continued even after he was imprisoned. She regularly visited him for many years, but they stopped communicating in 2022 for unknown reasons. Throughout his imprisonment, Joe O'Reilly maintained his innocence. He became a well-behaved inmate, avoiding any issues in the hopes of becoming eligible for parole in the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Joseph Saunier. Joseph Saunier was born in 1955 to a respected family of doctors in Shreveport, Louisiana. From a young age, he aspired to follow in his family's footsteps and become a skilled doctor. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Medical Science from the University of Baton Rouge in 1976. Joseph then applied to Louisiana State University in Shreveport and began working at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. While pursuing his university studies, Joseph successfully balanced his academic and professional responsibilities. He took on additional workload at the university and honed his skills through hands-on experience at the hospital. His hard work and dedication did not go unnoticed, and in his final year of training, he was appointed chief resident. After completing his studies, Joseph specialized in pathologic anatomy and went on to become a respected pathologist and laboratory director in Lubbock, Texas. However, his personal life was marked by tragedy, including the loss of she he loved. Joseph's 27-year marriage, which he had considered happy, ended in divorce when his wife fell in love with another man. Despite his own heartache, Joseph accepted her decision and agreed to the divorce, believing that she he loved had found happiness with someone else. Joseph was a man of strong character, nobility, and responsibility. Even after his divorce, he maintained a warm relationship with his ex-wife, Becky, and continued to support their 2 sons. This showed his resilience and strength in the face of adversity. When Becky tragically died at the hands of her new husband 2 years later, Joseph was shocked. He often thought back to their family years and mourned the loss. However, he remained a source of strength for his family. He took care of all the organizational and funeral expenses and helped his sons cope with the trauma. The tragedy had a profound effect on Joseph, who initially coped by immersing himself in his work and raising his sons. Later, he chose to start fresh in a new city with a new partner, relocating from Dallas to Lubbock, Texas in 2007. There, he took on the role of chief pathologist at Covenant Health System. Joseph sought a new hobby and enrolled in a local dance studio. The classes not only brought him joy but also provided opportunities to meet new people, including women. One warm summer evening, Michelle Tina walked into the dance class, and Joseph was immediately captivated. Michelle, with her elegance, great sense of humor, and sparkling eyes, lit up the room. Joseph, 57, knew right away that she was someone special. Michelle, 47, was equally taken with Joseph. She admired his confidence, respectful demeanor, and smooth dance moves. As they paired up to dance, they discovered a perfect harmony. Joseph and Michelle's connection deepened over time. He asked her to start a romantic relationship, and she accepted. Michelle had a captivating presence that inspired Joseph to make significant life changes. Leaving Amarillo, Joseph's new lover, Michelle, was escaping the fear and anxiety caused by her involvement with Thomas Dixon, a married plastic surgeon and owner of a private clinic. Their relationship began in 2008 when Michelle visited Thomas's clinic for Botox injections, initially starting as a friendly interaction that progressed into a romance. As a successful and independent woman, Michelle had built a career as an NFL executive and raised 4 grown children. She was free from obligations and didn't need anything from anyone. In contrast, Thomas was trapped in a 20-year marriage and began leading a double life to be with Michelle. When Thomas's wife discovered the affair, she filed for divorce, ending their 2-decade-long marriage. Thomas was so consumed by his infatuation with Michelle that he barely noticed the significant change in his life. He separated from his wife to be with Michelle, who had never expressed a desire to marry him. Thomas tried to get Michelle's attention, but his pressure tactics only scared her away. She realized he was manipulative and controlling, so she ended their relationship in 2010. Despite the breakup, Thomas continued to pursue Michelle. Thomas' obsession became overwhelming, causing Michelle to move away to escape his influence. She settled in Lubbock, where she met Joseph Saunier and started a new life. They quickly hit it off, and their relationship blossomed into true love. Joseph's family and friends welcomed Michelle with open arms, and he showered her with gifts and attention. He took her on trips, to fine restaurants, and to exclusive clubs. When Joseph realized he had found the one, he proposed to her in Los Angeles, surrounded by his entire family. At that moment, 47-year-old Michelle was deeply infatuated with her new partner, Joseph. Her social media was filled with daily declarations of love for him. As a result, her former lover, Thomas Dixon, became aware of her new relationship and was emotionally shaken to learn that Michelle had moved on and was planning to marry Joseph. Thomas realized he couldn't win Michelle back but still proposed rekindling their past romance, suggesting they become lovers again. However, Michelle firmly rejected his proposal and informed Joseph about the situation. As time passed, Michelle and Joseph began to feel like they were being watched. They even caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a camera flash through their backyard window but initially didn't think much of it, underestimating the severity of the situation. Things took a turn for the worse on July 11, 2012. A landscaper arrived at Joseph's home to discuss a remodeling project and was unable to reach Joseph. When he found an open door, he cautiously entered the house, finding it in disarray with a bullet hole near the entrance, suggesting a possible intruder. Upon searching the premises, the landscaper discovered the body of Joseph Saunier in the garage. Joseph had multiple stab and gunshot wounds. Believing the perpetrator might still be in the area, the landscaper left the house and called for emergency assistance. At 2:48 p.m., police received the call and immediately sent several patrol cars to the scene. Responding officers confirmed the identity of Joseph. A bottle with a hole shot through the bottom was discovered at the scene, suggesting that it had been used as a makeshift silencer for a gun. A forensic team was called in to collect evidence, which included the bottle and blood samples. The perpetrator seemed to have been careless, leaving behind a significant amount of evidence. The DNA from the bottle and blood samples were sent to a lab for analysis. Neighbors who were interviewed by detectives reported that they didn't see or hear anything suspicious. Unfortunately, there were no nearby CCTV cameras to capture the incident. According to the investigation, the perpetrator entered the house through a large window overlooking the backyard, which made the attack unexpected. The attacker confronted Joseph in the dining room and shot him. The wine bottle was likely used as a makeshift silencer at this point. Despite being shot, Joseph was still alive and made his way to the garage, where the attacker caught up with him and stabbed him multiple times. The autopsy revealed that Joseph had suffered 5 gunshot wounds and 11 stab wounds. The evidence suggested that the murder was not a random act, but the killer's identity and motive remained unknown. The investigation focused on Joseph's close friends and family. Michelle reported that she and Joseph had experienced strange occurrences in the months leading up to the murder. She believed that Joseph was being stalked and had seen a suspicious person lurking around his house. Joseph had also received persistent and unsettling phone calls and texts in the days before his death. Officers verified the information, but they suspected that the calls and messages were from other women Joseph was involved with. Since witnesses reported that Joseph was in contact with multiple women at the same time, investigators asked Michelle if she knew about these other women. Michelle claimed she was unaware of them. Joseph's sons defended their father, stating that he would never cheat, as it was not in his character. However, investigators continue to explore the possibility of a crime motivated by jealousy. During the next interrogation, Michelle cracked under the pressure, broke down in tears, and admitted that she knew several women who might be involved in the crime. Michelle revealed that several of Joseph's former girlfriends were constantly harassing him. Although he ignored them, they continued to express their disapproval of his upcoming wedding to Michelle. One of these women was a persistent caller and writer from Florida. Another was a nurse and colleague of Joseph, who regularly contacted Joseph. During this interview, Michelle mentioned Thomas Dixon. Until then, Michelle had not linked Thomas to the murder, as he had seemingly moved on with his life after she ended their affair. The police considered Thomas a viable suspect and decided to question him. Thomas willingly talked to the detectives. He admitted to being deeply in love with a woman named Michelle and revealed that he had divorced his wife for her. However, Michelle had refused to be with him, and Thomas eventually gave up and started a relationship with a younger woman. Thomas's new girlfriend, a medical student, provided a solid alibi for him, confirming he was at work and with her at the time of the crime. All suspects, including Michelle, had unshakable alibis. The detectives attempted to identify potential enemies of Joseph or individuals who stood to gain financially from his death, but no new leads emerged. When the lab results arrived, the case seemed to be at a standstill. Unfortunately, the forensic analysis did not provide any clarity. Although the DNA sample from the bottle did not match Joseph, the police database was unable to identify the owner of the DNA found at the crime scene. In a surprising turn of events, the police received a call from Paul Reynolds. He claimed that his roommate, David Shepard, had recently confessed to committing a murder in Lubbock. According to Paul, Shepard had attempted to take his own life after the crime but was rescued. Paul shared information with the police that Shepard had told him about the crime. Shepard seemed to have knowledge that only a few detectives knew, including the use of a bottle muffler. This new information led the officers to believe that Shepard was indeed involved in the crime. Another witness came forward, naming Shepard as the killer. Shepard was said to have been given instructions by a plastic surgeon. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered Shepard had a history of violence and multiple theft convictions. At that time, he was unemployed and recently divorced. When Shepard was brought in for questioning, he quickly began to confess. He confirmed that Thomas Dixon, the plastic surgeon, had hired him to commit the crime. According to Shepard, he had met Thomas at a bar where both were drinking away their recent breakups. Over time, their casual conversation turned into a real friendship, which eventually led to the crime. Thomas Dixon shared a sad tale of lost love, lamenting the fact that his ex-partner Michelle had left him for someone else and was now planning to get married. Unable to move on, Thomas confided in his friend Shepard about his desperation to win Michelle back. Together, they concocted a plan, but according to Shepard, it didn't initially involve murder. Their goal was to tarnish the reputation of Michelle's fiancé, Joseph, so that she would leave him and return to Thomas. To accomplish this goal, Thomas and Shepard hired women to pretend to be Joseph's mistresses for $1,000 each. These women were instructed to seduce Joseph, and a series of events was staged to create the impression that Joseph had fathered a child with one of them and then abandoned her. Despite these efforts, Joseph denied the allegations, and Michelle believed his denials. Initially, they suspected they were being stalked due to some suspicious activity, but it was later revealed that the activity was just Shepard visiting their house that night. He used his phone's flashlight to create the illusion that they were being watched. After their initial tactics failed to cause tension in their relationship, Thomas devised a more extreme plan. He offered Shepard 3 silver bars, valued at around $110,000, to kill the pathologist. Shepard accepted the offer, and as an act of good faith, Thomas gave him one of the silver bars. Shepard then sold the bar to a pawn shop. David Shepard reported that when he arrived at Joseph's house, events escalated out of control, resulting in an unintentional shooting. Shepard claimed he was in shock and shouted to check on Sonia when he didn't respond. He followed Sonia into the garage, where he found him lying flat, and upon checking, discovered he had no pulse. Shepard confessed to stabbing Joseph Sonia multiple times in an attempt to cover up what he described as involuntary manslaughter. He admitted to having the opportunity to call for emergency help but chose not to. After the stabbing, he mutilated the remains, took the rest of the bullion, and later attempted to take his own life. Shepard maintained that he initially agreed to participate in a crime without fully understanding what it entailed. When confronted with the reality of killing Joseph, he realized he was incapable of doing so. However, an accidental gunshot led to Sonia's death. Shepard was arrested the same day on charges of first-degree murder, supported by his testimony and substantial evidence, including incriminating phone calls and text messages. At the initial interview, detectives tried to get Thomas Dixon to confess, but he denied any involvement and requested a lawyer, leading to a lawsuit. Meanwhile, David Shepard pleaded guilty to his role in the crime and waived his right to appeal, as part of a deal with the prosecutor. He was sentenced to life without parole instead of facing the death penalty. Thomas Dixon, who only had circumstantial evidence against him, pleaded not guilty. However, during the trial, key witness David Shepard unexpectedly testified that he committed the crime alone and that Dixon was not involved. Shepard claimed under oath that the silver bars were meant to invest in a business they were planning to start together. The jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, resulting in a retrial. In 2016, the second trial took place, and Dixon was found guilty of first-degree murder, receiving a life sentence without parole. His lawyers appealed the decision, and the judgment was reversed. Dixon was released on $2 million bail, but the case wasn't over. The prosecutor's office sought to have the original sentence reinstated by the state's highest criminal court, and if that failed, a third trial would be held. The prosecutor's office filed the motion on February 11, 2019, which was granted in April 2020. As a result, the bail was revoked, and an arrest warrant was reissued. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals later overturned the lower court's decision, upholding Thomas Dixon's original sentence. The judge ordered that Dixon must continue serving his life sentence without parole. He is currently imprisoned in La Mesa, Texas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nicole Peets. Nicole Peets was born on February 26, 1973, in King County, Washington. Her parents, who later divorced while Nicole was still in school, had her as their only child together. During her high school years, Nicole was a lively and sociable individual who participated in sports and had a charming personality. She had many friends and enjoyed trips to the countryside, with Lake Sammamish, located east of Seattle, being her favorite vacation spot. She spent her summer vacations there every year. After high school, Nicole attended Western Washington College, where she studied public relations. Alongside her studies, she continued to engage in sports and maintained an excellent physical shape. She decided to turn her passion for sports into a career and landed a job as a trainer at a local sports club. There, she quickly earned the respect of her colleagues and gained a loyal client base who regularly attended her group classes. At the same time, Nicole pursued higher education in management and eventually secured a job at a major mobile communications company. Outwardly, Nicole appeared to be a friendly and sociable person who was always willing to help others. However, few people realized that she was hiding a great deal of pain and misery behind this facade. As a teenager, Nicole struggled with addiction after her parents got divorced. This event was traumatic for her fragile and still developing psyche, leading her to rebel and seek solace in bad company and alcohol. Unfortunately, this led to a severe addiction that lasted for several years and had a devastating impact on Nicole's physical and mental health. Her mother, Gail, was often away from home due to her demanding job as a flight attendant and didn't notice the warning signs. Nicole lived with her elderly grandmother, who also didn't initially realize that her granddaughter was regularly consuming alcohol. By the time the truth came to light, the damage had already been done. Fortunately, Nicole's mother was there to support her. Gail not only arranged for Nicole to receive therapy but also attended AA meetings with her, helping her to open up and overcome her addiction. By that time, Gail had remarried, and her new partner, Rod, was very supportive of Nicole. He treated her like his own daughter and believed she could overcome her addiction. Nicole took therapy seriously, attending every session, and soon overcame her addiction. However, the effects of alcohol on her health were significant. Nicole developed severe pancreas problems, requiring surgery. More devastatingly, her early alcohol abuse damaged her reproductive system, rendering her unable to have children. After overcoming her addiction in the mid-1990s, Nicole met her future husband, David, at her new job at a sports club. David, a regular at the club, was a tall, handsome young man who was diligent about his fitness routine. He was immediately drawn to Nicole, and she, too, noticed the attractive young man and became interested. Although David was 4 years younger than Nicole, the age difference did not bother them. The relationship between Nicole and David gradually developed into a romantic one, which lasted almost 8 years before they got married in 2002. Their intimate wedding ceremony in Hawaii was attended only by their closest friends and family. After exchanging their vows, they moved to a quiet town called Linwood in Washington State, where they bought a home and began their new life together. Nicole was known for being sociable, friendly, and had a talent for building relationships. She quickly formed close bonds with the neighbors and had a passion for animals, with multiple dogs being part of the family. Because unable to have children of her own, she directed her maternal instincts towards her pets. David and Nicole were viewed as the epitome of a happy married couple, with a seemingly perfect relationship that brought them joy. One of Nicole's many hobbies was cooking, and she excelled at it. She delighted her husband and impressed guests with her culinary skills, taking pleasure in sharing meals and company with those she loved. Tragedy struck when Nicole disappeared on the eve of her 33rd birthday in 2006. Nicole failed to report to work and was unreachable by her family throughout the day. Her mother, Gail, tried to contact her but was unsuccessful, prompting her to alert David, Nicole's husband, to see if he knew what was going on. However, David had also been unable to reach Nicole. When questioned, David revealed that he and Nicole had argued the previous day, and when she didn't answer her phone the next day, he assumed she was still upset. He waited until evening to attempt to apologize, only to realize Nicole was still missing. It wasn't until the evening of the second day, when Nicole still hadn't contacted her family and her phone was still unreachable, that the police decided to launch a search. They began by investigating the last known location where Nicole was seen, her home with David. An investigation of the room where Nicole Peets was last seen found no signs of evidence of kidnapping. The absence of her personal car suggested that she might have simply left on her own. The family turned to social media to spread the word and ask for help in finding their daughter. They also immediately flew to Linwood, where they started their own search efforts. They put up posters with her picture and spoke to people who knew her, hoping someone might have information about her whereabouts. The police searched for Nicole and her car, trying to determine the route she took on the day she disappeared. Tragically, the worst fears were confirmed a few days later when a jogger discovered a young woman's body in a local park area. The jogger had taken an unusual route that morning. It was there that he stumbled upon something suspicious in the shrubbery, which turned out to be a brutally mutilated, naked body. The police were immediately notified, and forensic experts suggested that the crime was violent due to the presence of severe blunt force trauma and the lack of clothing. The autopsy revealed extensive bruising, abrasions, and blunt force injuries, indicating that the victim had been severely beaten before her death. The cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation, and it appeared that the killer had used their bare hands. Police initially believed the body they found was that of Nicole Peets, a young woman who had gone missing several days earlier and had been the subject of a citywide search. Her identity was confirmed by her family as Nicole. When Nicole's mother, Gail, saw her daughter's body at the morgue, she was overcome with grief and needed medical attention. Her husband, Rod, was also devastated, but his reaction seemed a bit unusual to some. He didn't seem truly distraught and his emotions seemed forced. However, at that time no one paid much attention to this, because everyone coped with the tragedy in their own way. Police believed the missing car was the primary target of the attack and would hold key evidence. They released a description of the gray Volkswagen Polo to the media, asking for tips. Weeks later, a security guard found the car in a parking lot on the outskirts of the city, noticing it had been parked there for an extended period. The police took the car for a thorough examination, hoping to find evidence and clues that would lead them to the perpetrator and help reconstruct the crime scene. However, their search yielded nothing. The only fingerprints and DNA found in the car belonged to Nicole and her husband, who occasionally drove the vehicle. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the investigators were reluctant to return the car to David. In addition, the victim's lack of clothes raised questions. The numerous injuries suggested a rage-driven attack, possibly a personal vendetta. However, Nicole was known for her kind nature and had no known enemies. The investigation into this complex case was on the verge of going cold, with no new leads or directions to pursue after nearly a year. The lack of witnesses and surveillance cameras in the parking lot where the car was abandoned made it difficult to gather evidence. However, one peculiar detail stood out. The driver's seat was positioned in a way that suggested the person driving the car was significantly taller and larger than the victim. The police obtained footage from the gas station security cameras, but the contents remained unclear. Frustrated by the lack of progress and the fact that the killer was still at large, Nicole's parents took matters into their own hands. They hired a private investigator to gather information and verify their suspicions, and offered a $10,000 reward to anyone who could provide useful information about the case. David, the husband of the victim, initially showed interest in the investigation, but his enthusiasm waned after 6 months. He eventually remarried, having a child with his new wife. This news was devastating for Gail, the victim's mother, as her daughter had been unable to have children, and David had often criticized her for this. Gail repeatedly suggested that David might be the culprit, but many people believed Gail was motivated by resentment. The police seemed to dismiss this theory altogether. However, 6 years after the crime, David was taken into custody as the prime suspect. One unusual circumstance was a gas station security footage that captured a man using Nicole credit card. The footage appeared to show a man resembling David, but he wore a head covering and dark glasses, making a positive identification impossible. Although this recording was not definitive proof, it was still added to the case file. Another discrepancy was the missing wedding ring, which Nicole never removed from her finger. Initially, investigators believed the killer might have taken it, but they found the ring in a box on the dressing table in Nicole's home. During the examination of Nicole's body, experts found a dental mouth guard in her mouth. This device was specifically designed to prevent teeth grinding, a condition known as bruxism, which Nicole experienced during sleep. The mouth guard had been prescribed to her shortly before her death due to her nervousness, which caused involuntary muscle spasms in her jaw. These spasms had led to the erosion of her tooth enamel and chipping of her teeth. The investigation concluded that Nicole was likely killed in her own bed while she was still asleep. This theory was supported by the fact that she was not wearing any clothes and her body was clean, with no signs of a struggle. Additionally, Nicole's face was free of makeup. The mouth guard found at the scene was not a significant factor, as Nicole had only recently started using it. Moreover, forensic experts analyzed the driver's seat in the car and found that the last person to sit behind the wheel had the same physical characteristics as David, Nicole's husband. The car only had fingerprints belonging to David and Nicole, suggesting that no one else had been in the vehicle. A crucial discovery was made possible by advances in technology. The killer had attempted to mislead the investigation by using Nicole's phone in various parts of the city. However, at the same locations and times, David's phone was also active, revealing a suspicious coincidence. Furthermore, it was discovered that David had a motive for the crime, and the seemingly perfect family was actually facing a severe crisis. Nicole was juggling multiple responsibilities, studying, working 2 jobs, and supporting others struggling with addiction. Meanwhile, her husband led a carefree life, unable to hold down a job and spending most of his time in bars and clubs. He would often use Nicole's earnings to fund his nightlife, including affairs with other women. Nicole tried to intervene in her husband's addiction, suggesting AA meetings, but he dismissed her concerns. The situation worsened as David's infidelity was revealed. After Nicole's sudden and mysterious death, David hastily filed for a large insurance payout and began a new relationship. It was later discovered that David had been having an affair with a woman named Jane for several months prior to Nicole's death. While Nicole was working or studying, David would often meet Jane at bars and clubs. Just before Nicole's birthday, David brought Jane to their home, where Nicole unexpectedly walked in on them. This led to a heated argument between Nicole and David. Nicole confided in her mother about the incident just days before she mysteriously vanished. Gail had her suspicions about her son-in-law from the start, but the police claimed they didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. As a result, the case was closed, and the family was left in the dark about the investigation. Over time, they lost hope that the person responsible would be held accountable. After his wife's death, David received a significant insurance payout, which he spent on lavish gifts for his mistress, Jane. Gail believed that Jane might have been involved in the crime, but she was only questioned as a witness due to lack of evidence. In 2013, David went to court, still denying any involvement in his wife's death. His lawyers initially argued that the evidence against him was circumstantial and not conclusive. However, as the prosecution presented more incriminating evidence, the defense shifted their strategy. They portrayed David as a victim, suggesting that his wife, Nicole, had become unbearable to live with due to her addiction to pain pills and drinking. The claims that Nicole was unstable were unfounded and disputed by everyone who knew her. Even if she had lost control, that would not have justified David's brutal murder of his wife. Ultimately, David's guilt was proven beyond a doubt, and he received the maximum sentence allowed by state law. David was sentenced to 18 years in prison, but he will be eligible for parole in 2025 after serving 2/3 of his sentence.